Take a deep breath. Let your eyes gently close or soften. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, you're here now. You're safe. Welcome to this soothing historical journey. Today we will explore the life aboard pirate ships in the golden age of piracy. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where are you listening from and what time is it for you? Drop a comment below. I read everyone's comment. It's a small way to feel connected, even in the quiet. And if this kind of slow, calming journey helps you to sleep, kindly consider subscribing this channel. I'd love to see you again. Now, let's start today's historical journey. As you continue to relax deeply, let's explore the rich tradition of storytelling that flourished aboard pirate vessels during the Golden Age. In an era before widespread literacy and with limited reading material available, oral narrative played a central role in entertainment, education, and the transmission of maritime knowledge and culture. Imagine the scene below decks during the evening hours. The day's work is complete, the watches are set, and those not on duty have gathered in the dim light of hanging lanterns. Feel your body becoming even more relaxed as you envision this moment of community and shared narrative, a respite from the physical demands of maritime life. Storytelling served multiple practical functions aboard ship beyond mere entertainment. In an age when formal navigation relied on limited instrumentation and imperfect charts, oral accounts of coastlines, currents, weather patterns, and landmarks supplemented written information. Experienced sailors shared detailed descriptions of harbors they had visited, reefs they had encountered, or distinctive features that helped identify location. This practical knowledge, passed through narrative, enhanced the collective navigational wisdom of the crew. Take another deep breath as you consider the types of stories that might fill the evening hours. Tales of previous voyages and naval encounters combined practical information with entertainment, often growing more elaborate with each retelling. Accounts of maritime disasters served as both cautionary tales and opportunities to discuss proper responses to dangerous situations. Stories of remarkable weather events, unusual natural phenomena, or encounters with unfamiliar cultures expanded the geographical understanding of listeners while satisfying curiosity about the wider world. The diverse backgrounds of pirate crew members enriched this storytelling tradition. European sailors contributed folk tales from their regions of origin, Norse sagas, Celtic legends, Mediterranean myths, or local stories from coastal villages. Formerly enslaved Africans brought narrative traditions from their homelands, including trickster tales, origin stories, and accounts of historical figures. Indigenous Caribbean crew members shared their own rich storytelling heritage, with narratives often closely connected to the very waters through which the pirates sailed. Feel yourself drifting peacefully as you imagine how supernatural elements featured prominently in maritime storytelling. The unpredictable and dangerous nature of sea life created fertile ground for tales of omens, superstitions, and encounters with the uncanny. Stories of ghost ships like the Flying Dutchman, doomed to sail forever without making port, reflected deep anxieties about the possibility of eternal wandering that haunted many sailors. Descriptions of mermaids, sea monsters, and other maritime creatures populated the liminal space between the known and unknown parts of the oceanic world. Narratives of famous pirates circulated widely, creating a form of occupational folklore that helped construct collective identity. Tales of successful captains like Bartholomew Roberts, Henry Avery, or Edward Teach, Blackbeard, served as both entertainment and instruction, while accounts of captured and executed pirates reminded listeners of the potential consequences of their chosen profession. These stories often emphasized the cleverness, courage, or ferocity of their subjects, creating larger-than-life figures that inspired emulation or caution. As your body remains completely at ease, consider how practical jokes and humorous anecdotes lightened the mood during long voyages. The closed environment of a ship at sea, with its forced proximity and limited privacy, generated both tension and comedy. Stories that highlighted the foibles of pompous officers, the misadventures of inexperienced sailors, or moments of unexpected absurdity provided psychological release through shared laughter, strengthening social bonds among the crew. Music frequently accompanied storytelling, with sea shanties and ballads preserving narrative in memorable form. Songs like The Ballad of Captain Kidd or The Female Rover about women pirates, combined historical elements with dramatic embellishment, creating enduring accounts that would eventually transition from oral tradition to printed broadsides and songbooks. These musical stories were particularly effective for preserving and transmitting narrative across linguistic boundaries in multilingual crews. Let the rhythm of your breathing remain slow and deep as you appreciate how these storytelling traditions connected pirates to both maritime culture and their diverse origins. Despite their rejection of conventional society, pirates maintained and adapted narrative traditions that linked them to broader human experiences of wonder, fear, humor, and the search for meaning in an unpredictable world. The best storytellers aboard ship earned special status through their ability to transport listeners beyond the confined wooden world of the vessel. Their narratives created mental journeys to distant lands, encounters with extraordinary beings, or connections to historical events, offering temporary escape from the monotony and hardship that often characterized life at sea. In this way, storytelling served not just as entertainment, but as a crucial psychological resource for maintaining morale during long voyages. As you continue to rest in this deeply relaxed state, let's explore how pirates and other mariners experienced and adapted to the powerful environmental forces that shape their daily existence. The weather and climate patterns of the Atlantic world directly influenced every aspect of maritime life, creating both opportunities and dangers for those who lived at sea. Imagine yourself aboard a pirate vessel as dawn breaks, with the crew's attention focused intently on the sky and sea around them. Feel your body becoming even more relaxed as you consider how these maritime communities developed sophisticated observational skills and weather knowledge long before modern meteorological science or forecasting technology. For sailors of the Golden Age, reading the signs of upcoming weather changes was not an academic interest, but a survival skill. Cloud formations received particular attention. Certain patterns reliably preceded storms, while others suggested continuing fair conditions. The color of the sky at sunrise and sunset, the appearance of rings around the moon, unusual clarity of distant objects, and subtle shifts in wind direction all conveyed valuable information to experienced maritime observers. Take another deep breath as you consider how the annual cycle of seasonal weather patterns shaped pirate operations. The hurricane season in the Caribbean, roughly from June through November, prompted many captains to seek safer cruising grounds during these dangerous months. Some would sail northward along the American coast, while others might cross to the African coast or venture into the Indian Ocean, returning to Caribbean waters when the storm season passed. This seasonal migration reflected not just safety concerns, but practical knowledge about shipping patterns, as merchant vessels similarly adjusted their routes to avoid the worst weather. The trade winds, consistent easterly winds in tropical regions, provided reliable propulsion for vessels and shaped common sailing routes. Ships traveling from Europe to the Caribbean would typically sail southward to catch these favorable winds, while the return journey often followed a more northerly route to make use of the prevailing westerlies in higher latitudes. Pirates who understood these patterns could predict likely locations for encountering merchant vessels, positioning themselves along these established routes for maximum opportunity. Feel yourself drifting peacefully as you imagine how daily weather directly influenced shipboard life. Rain was both blessing and curse. It created uncomfortable working conditions, but also provided precious fresh water that could be collected in canvas sheets or barrels. Sailors would often strip to the skin during rainstorms to wash both their bodies and clothing, taking advantage of this natural shower. Extended calms could be more dangerous than storms for sailing vessels, leaving them motionless and depleting supplies as they waited for wind to return. Storms represented the most dramatic weather challenge, requiring all hands to work together regardless of normal watch schedules. Experienced captains might recognize approaching severe weather early enough to take preventative measures, reducing sail, securing loose items, battening down hatches, and changing course to minimize the storm's impact. During the worst conditions, vessels might run with minimal sail or even bare poles, seeking merely to survive rather than make progress toward any destination. As your body remains completely at ease, consider how climate variations across different latitudes required constant adaptation. Pirates operating in the Caribbean experienced the tropical climate's intense heat and humidity, with the sun creating dangerous conditions for those working on exposed decks. Hydration became crucial, though limited fresh water supplies meant that thirst was a constant companion. In contrast, those who ventured into more northerly waters faced cold that penetrated the inadequate clothing available to common sailors, with chilblains and frostbite threatening extremities during winter months. The environmental challenges of maritime life extended beyond weather to other natural phenomena. Navigating the complex coastlines and reefs of the Caribbean required intimate knowledge of local conditions, often obtained through informal charts and oral tradition rather than official maps. Tidal patterns affected access to certain harbors and hiding places, while prevailing currents could either assist or impede a vessel's progress depending on its direction of travel. Let the rhythm of your breathing remain slow and deep as you appreciate the profound relationship these maritime communities maintained with the natural world. Unlike modern societies insulated from environmental forces by technology and infrastructure, pirates and other sailors lived in direct, immediate contact with weather systems that controlled their movement, affected their physical comfort, and sometimes threatened their survival. This intimate connection to natural patterns created a form of embodied knowledge, an intuitive understanding of wind, wave, and weather that became so internalized that experienced sailors could sense subtle environmental shifts that landsmen might miss entirely. The success of pirate operations, like all maritime activities of the era, depended on this deep attunement to the elements and the ability to work with rather than against the powerful forces of the natural world. As you continue to relax deeply, let's explore the economic aspects of pirate life. The complex systems of exchange, value, and distribution that operated aboard these floating communities and connected them to broader Atlantic trading networks. Beyond the dramatic moments of capturing prizes, pirates engaged in sophisticated economic activities that sustained their maritime way of life. Imagine a pirate vessel that has recently captured a merchant ship carrying valuable cargo. Feel your body becoming even more relaxed as you consider what happens after the immediate excitement of the seizure. Rather than the chaotic looting often depicted in fiction, historical accounts suggest a surprisingly organized process governed by the ship's articles and overseen by the quartermaster. The cargo would be systematically inventoried, with particular attention to items of immediate use to the vessel: navigational instruments, weapons, ammunition, food supplies, and naval stores like rope, canvas, and timber. The most valuable trade goods would be secured for later distribution or exchange rather than immediately consumed. Textiles, spices, sugar, cocoa, and other commodities retain their value only if preserved in good condition. These items couldn't be distributed immediately among the crew as shares, but needed to be converted to currency or more divisible goods through subsequent transactions in port or with other vessels. Take another deep breath as you consider the economic networks that allowed pirates to convert seized goods into usable wealth. Certain ports, particularly during specific historical periods, functioned as markets where pirates could sell captured cargo with few questions asked. Places like Port Royal in Jamaica before the 1692 earthquake, Nassau in the Bahamas during its Pirate Republic phase, and various settlements on Madagascar served this function, with merchants willing to purchase goods at discount prices and resell them through legitimate channels. In some cases, colonial governors or other officials might turn a blind eye to these transactions in exchange for bribes or a percentage of profits. This corruption created a gray area between legitimate and illegitimate commerce, with pirate-acquired goods gradually laundered into respectable trade through multiple exchanges. Some historians argue that this illicit trade played a significant role in developing certain colonial economies, providing goods and currency that might otherwise have been unavailable. Feel yourself drifting peacefully as you imagine the internal economy aboard pirate vessels. Unlike naval ships, where provisions belong to the admiralty, or merchant vessels, where supplies were company property, pirates typically held food, drink, and other consumables in common. The ship's articles usually specified that these necessities were to be shared equally without regard to rank, though captains and officers might enjoy better quality if not greater quantity. The distribution of captured wealth followed the shares system outlined in the Articles of Agreement. A typical arrangement might allocate 2 shares to the captain, 1.5 shares to the quartermaster and other officers, and 1 share to each ordinary crew member. This relatively egalitarian division contrasted sharply with merchant vessels where common sailors received minimal wages, while owners claimed the vast majority of profits, or naval vessels where prize money was distributed with extreme inequality favoring high-ranking officers. As your body remains completely at ease, consider how pirates created economic security systems within their communities. Many ships' articles included specific compensation for injuries sustained in service to the vessel, an early form of disability insurance. The loss of a right arm might receive 600 pieces of 8, a left arm 500, a right leg 400, and lesser injuries proportional amounts. Some pirate communities also made provisions for retirement, with Madagascar and other remote settlements serving as havens where successful pirates could live on their accumulated wealth beyond the reach of European authorities. Currency aboard pirate vessels represented another fascinating economic aspect. While gold and silver coins were certainly valued, their diverse origins created complexity in an era before standardized international currency. Spanish pieces of 8, silver coins minted in the Americas, functioned as a common standard of value, but English guineas, French livres, Dutch guilders, and various colonial currencies might all circulate simultaneously. Experienced quartermasters developed expertise in relative values and exchange rates, ensuring fair distribution despite this monetary diversity. Let the rhythm of your breathing remain slow and deep as you appreciate how these economic arrangements reflected pirate values and practical needs. The emphasis on relatively equal shares, compensation for injuries, and communal access to necessities represented not just practical solutions to maritime challenges, but expressions of an alternative vision of economic relations. One that rejected the extreme inequality of mainstream maritime commerce while still operating within a broadly capitalist framework. The economic activity of pirates extended beyond simple theft to include complex networks of exchange, investment, risk management, and wealth distribution. Far from merely consuming stolen goods and immediate gratification, successful pirate communities created sustainable economic systems that, however briefly, supported their autonomous existence amid conventional authority. The soundscape of piracy, a world of maritime noise. As you continue to relax deeply, let's immerse ourselves in the auditory experience of life aboard a pirate vessel. The distinctive sounds of a wooden ship under sail created a sonic environment unlike any other, shaping the sensory world of those who lived at sea during the golden age of piracy. Imagine awakening in the pre-dawn darkness below decks. Feel your body becoming even more relaxed as you attune your awareness to the symphony of sounds that surrounded sleeping pirates. The most constant presence was the voice of the ship itself, the continuous creaking of wooden timbers flexing against each other as the vessel responded to wave motion. This omnipresent soundtrack varied with sea conditions, from the gentle, almost rhythmic creaks of calm waters to the alarming groans and sharp cracks during storms when the ship's structure was tested by powerful forces. The sound of water accompanied every moment at sea. The steady rush against the hull as the vessel moved through waves, the occasional splash of spray coming aboard in rougher conditions, the dripping of condensation in the spaces below deck, and the rhythmic gurgle of the wake trailing behind. These water sounds created a constant auditory backdrop that sailors came to associate with the normality of life at sea. Their absence when on land often felt as strangely disorienting. Take another deep breath as you consider the human sounds that filled the vessel during waking hours. The ship's bell marked the passage of time, ringing to signal the change of watch and to communicate specific messages to the crew. Commands were shouted from the quarterdeck by officers, repeated by intermediaries, and acknowledged by those carrying out the orders, creating chains of vocal communication that carried over the ambient noise of wind and water. Physical labor produced its own soundscape. The grunt of effort as heavy sails were raised, The rhythmic squeaking of blocks and tackles as lines were hauled, the thumping of bare feet on wooden decks as men moved about their tasks. During complex operations like tacking, changing direction by turning the bow through the wind, these sounds would intensify into an organized chaos of creaking rigging, flapping canvas, shouted commands, and coordinated human effort. Feel yourself drifting peacefully as you imagine the distinctive sounds of shipboard-toward tools and activities. The carpenter's hammer and saw maintained the wooden structure, while the distinctive scraping of the cook's utensils against iron pots signaled approaching meal times. The splash of the lead line being cast to measure depth near coastal waters, the rattle of the anchor chain being paid out or raised, the distinctive thud of cannon during gunnery practice, each sound conveyed specific meaning to experienced maritime ears. Music formed an important part of the sonic landscape aboard many vessels. Work songs, or shanties, coordinated group labor through rhythm and call response patterns, making heavy tasks easier through synchronized effort. During periods of relaxation, instrumental music might be heard, perhaps the notes of a fiddle, tin whistle, or small drum played by talented crew members. The sound of singing often marked evening hours when watches gathered to share songs that connected them to distant homes or celebrated their maritime identity. As your body remains completely at ease, consider how language itself contributed to this auditory world. The specialized maritime vocabulary, mixed with the diverse accents and languages found aboard many pirate vessels, created a distinctive linguistic environment. English might be heard alongside French, Dutch, Spanish, Portuguese, and various African languages, with a maritime pidgin developing to bridge communication gaps between sailors of different origins. In moments of battle, the soundscape transformed dramatically. The thunder of cannon fire dominated all other sounds, the concussive blasts temporarily deafening those nearby. Pistol shots cracked sharply during boarding actions, while metal struck metal as cutlasses and other weapons clashed. Human voices raised in aggression, fear, or pain added to this cacophony of conflict, creating an overwhelming auditory experience that many historical accounts mention as particularly disorienting. Let the rhythm of your breathing remain slow and deep as you appreciate how these mariners developed specialized auditory attention, learning to extract critical information from their sonic environment. Experienced sailors could identify approaching weather changes through subtle shifts in wind sounds, recognize the type of ship approaching by the particular rhythm of its oars or pattern of its bells, and detect dangerous shoals by changes in the sound of water against the hull. This rich auditory world shaped the consciousness of those who lived at sea, creating a sensory experience dramatically different from land-based life. The constant presence of maritime sounds became so internalized that many sailors reported difficulty sleeping in the uncanny silence of land when their voyages ended. For pirates who spent years aboard ship, this maritime soundscape became the defining auditory backdrop of their existence, as familiar and necessary as the rhythm of their own breathing. As you continue to rest in this deeply relaxed state, let's explore a fascinating aspect of pirate culture: the practice of tattooing and other forms of body modification that mark these maritime outlaws both literally and symbolically. While popular images of pirates often include earrings, tattoos, and scars, the historical reality of these practices reveals much about the practical concerns and cultural identity of those who lived at sea. Imagine a veteran pirate whose body bears the visible record of his maritime life. Feel your body becoming even more relaxed as you consider how tattoos served multiple purposes in pirate and broader maritime culture during this period. Far from mere decoration, these permanent marks communicated identity, spiritual beliefs, life experiences, and even practical information. Tattooing has ancient roots in maritime cultures around the world, but its spread among European sailors accelerated after contact with Polynesian cultures in the Pacific. By the early 18th century, the practice had become relatively common among all types of seafarers, including pirates. The painful process involved puncturing the skin with needles or sharp bones and introducing pigments, often soot or gunpowder mixed with breast milk or urine, to create permanent designs. Take another deep breath as you consider the common motifs that adorn sailors' skin. Religious symbols, crosses, angels, or scenes from biblical stories provided spiritual protection and expressed faith during the constant dangers of maritime life. Patriotic emblems like flags or national symbols maintained connection to homelands left behind. Nautical images such as anchors, ships, mermaids, or stars reflected professional identity and served as talismans for safe voyaging. Some tattoos served distinctly practical purposes. A pig tattooed on one foot and a rooster on the other was believed to protect against drowning, as these animals were kept in wooden crates that would float if washed overboard. Names or initials of loved ones preserved connections to family during long absences, while records of significant voyages or naval battles chronicled a sailor's career on his skin. Some pirates recorded the names or images of captured vessels, creating a permanent logbook of their exploits. Feel yourself drifting peacefully as you imagine other forms of body modification common among pirates and sailors. Gold earrings served multiple functions beyond decoration. They marked a sailor who had crossed the equator or rounded Cape Horn, indicated wealth that stayed with the wearer at all times, and supposedly improved eyesight, a folk belief with no medical basis. Some sailors believed that gold earrings would pay for a proper Christian burial if their bodies washed ashore after death at sea, as anyone finding them would use the gold to finance funeral services rather than simply leaving the body. Scarification, while rarely deliberate, became another form of bodily marking for those who lived the demanding physical life of maritime labor. The harsh conditions aboard wooden sailing vessels ensured that most experienced sailors bore numerous scars from accidents, conflicts, or punishments. Heavy ropes sliding through hands created distinctive calloused patterns, while falls from rigging or encounters with sharp tools left permanent marks. These unintentional modifications of the body visibly identified veteran seafarers, distinguishing them from inexperienced landsmen. As your body remains completely at ease, consider how these bodily practices reflected the liminality of pirate existence, their position between conventional society and the separate world of maritime life. Tattoos in particular marked pirates as belonging to a distinct community with its own aesthetics, values, and traditions. For European sailors in the early 18th century, extensive tattooing represented a significant deviation from mainland cultural norms, physically embodying their separation from land-based society. For those who joined pirate crews from non-European backgrounds, different traditions of body modification might be maintained or adapted within the maritime context. African scarification practices, Caribbean indigenous tattooing traditions, and other cultural approaches to bodily marking contributed to the diverse visual appearance of pirate crews, reflecting their multicultural composition. Let the rhythm of your breathing remain slow and deep as you appreciate how these physical markings represented both individual expression and community belonging in pirate society. In a world where personal possessions were limited by the practical constraints of shipboard life, the body itself became an important site for displaying identity, recording experiences, and preserving connections to beliefs and loved ones. The marked bodies of Golden Age pirates embodied their marginal social position, too colorful and modified for ready acceptance in conventional society, yet carrying symbols that connected them to the broader traditions and beliefs of their original cultures. These physical modifications, like so many aspects of pirate life, reflected both practical adaptation to maritime existence and the creation of alternative identities beyond the controlling influence of land-based authorities. As you continue to relax deeply, let's explore a more intimate aspect of daily life aboard pirate vessels, the challenges of personal hygiene and sanitation in the confined wooden world of an 18th century ship. While popular depictions often emphasize the grimy, unwashed nature of pirates, the reality was more complex, with maritime communities developing practical approaches to cleanliness within their environmental constraints. Imagine the practical realities of maintaining personal cleanliness aboard a wooden vessel, with limited fresh water, minimal privacy, and dozens of men working in close quarters. Feel your body becoming even more relaxed as you consider how these environmental limitations shaped hygiene practices that differed significantly from both our modern expectations and from contemporary standards on land. Fresh water was among the most precious resources aboard any sailing vessel. Stored in wooden casks that eventually developed algae and became increasingly unpalatable, water was primarily reserved for drinking and cooking rather than washing. A typical pirate ship might carry several tons of water in multiple barrels, but this supply had to last for weeks or months between opportunities for replenishment, creating a need for careful conservation. Take another deep breath as you consider the practical solutions developed for personal cleanliness within these limitations. Seawater was commonly used for basic washing, with sailors scrubbing themselves on deck using buckets drawn from alongside the ship. While seawater itself doesn't produce lather with soap, it could remove salt, sweat, and grime accumulated from labor. Some sailors kept small portions of their freshwater ration for rinsing after a saltwater wash, particularly to prevent the itchy salt residue that would otherwise remain on the skin. Soap aboard ship was typically a rough, homemade variety produced from wood ash and animal fat, ingredients that might be available from the ship's cooking activities. This lye soap served multiple purposes beyond personal hygiene, including laundry and general cleaning. Some sailors preferred to wash in urine, which contains ammonia and actually provides some cleaning properties, a practice that seems alien to modern sensibilities, but represented a practical adaptation to limited resources. Feel yourself drifting peacefully as you imagine the clothing care that complemented personal washing. Sailors typically owned several changes of their basic garments, shirts, and trousers, allowing them to switch to clean clothing while washing soiled items. Laundry was done in seawater, sometimes with soap when available, and hung from rigging to dry in the sun and wind. This washing served not just cleanliness, but practical necessity, as salt-encrusted clothing could cause painful chafing and skin sores during physical labor. Dental hygiene, while not approaching modern standards, wasn't entirely neglected. Many sailors cleaned their teeth using a small stick with frayed ends as a makeshift brush, sometimes with abrasives like salt, sand, or crushed charcoal as cleansing agents. Others used short lengths of rope, unraveled at one end, to create a fibrous cleaning tool. The common sailor's diet, while nutritionally limited, contained less sugar than modern diets, potentially reducing dental issues despite minimal care. As your body remains completely at ease, consider how pirates addressed the most basic sanitation needs aboard ship. The head, nautical terminology for the toilet, was typically located at the bow of the ship in the area called the beakhead. These simple facilities consisted of holes in a plank extending over the water, allowing waste to fall directly into the sea. This location utilized the forward motion of the ship to carry waste away rather than alongside, a practical consideration for obvious reasons. While offering minimal privacy, these facilities benefited from natural ventilation in their exposed position. For ships at anchor or during storms, when the exposed head became dangerous to use, wooden buckets or chamber pots provided alternatives below decks. The contents would be emptied overboard when conditions permitted, with specific crew members often assigned to this unpleasant but necessary task as part of their duties. Let the rhythm of your breathing remain slow and deep as you appreciate how these hygiene practices, while falling far short of modern standards, represented practical adaptations to extraordinary constraints. The limited fresh water, confined space, and minimal privacy aboard wooden sailing vessels made contemporary land-based hygiene practices impossible to maintain. Despite these limitations, historical accounts suggest that pirates, like other sailors, recognized the practical importance of basic cleanliness for health and comfort during long voyages. Far from the romanticized filth of fictional pirates, historical maritime communities developed pragmatic approaches to personal hygiene that balanced resource limitations with basic human needs. As you continue to rest in this deeply relaxed state, let's explore another critical aspect of life aboard pirate vessels: the prevention and management of disease in these confined wooden communities. In an era before germ theory, when the causes of illness remained mysterious, maritime societies developed practical approaches to public health that helped maintain the functioning of their floating worlds. Imagine the vulnerability of a ship's company to contagious disease. Dozens of individuals living in close quarters, sharing air, food, and water, with limited ability to isolate the sick or access medical care. Feel your body becoming even heavier and more relaxed as you consider how this vulnerability shaped practices aimed at preserving community health aboard pirate vessels. Disease represented one of the greatest threats to maritime operations during the golden age of piracy. More sailors died from illness than from battle or accidents, making disease prevention not merely a matter of individual health, but of collective survival. A widespread outbreak could leave a vessel without sufficient healthy crew to sail effectively, rendering it vulnerable to capture or natural hazards. Take another deep breath as you consider the practical measures employed to maintain shipboard sanitation. The regular cleaning of decks was not merely aesthetic, but served important health purposes. The practice of holy stoning, scrubbing wooden decks with sandstone blocks and seawater, removed accumulated grime that could harbor disease. This daily ritual, while physically demanding, helped maintain a cleaner living environment aboard ship. Ventilation received particular attention as a health measure. The below-decks areas where the crew slept and ate could become dangerously stuffy, especially in tropical climates. Hatches were kept open whenever weather permitted, and wind sails, canvas tubes designed to direct fresh air below, were used to improve circulation. During fair weather, many activities were conducted on the open deck rather than in the confined spaces below, providing natural ventilation that helped reduce disease transmission. Feel yourself drifting peacefully as you imagine other preventative measures. Fumigation using various substances was common practice when disease threatened. Burning sulfur produced acrid smoke believed to cleanse the air of disease-causing miasmas, or bad air. Vinegar was sprinkled throughout ships as a disinfectant, a practice that, while based on incomplete understanding, actually had some effectiveness against certain pathogens. Some captains insisted on regular fumigation as preventative maintenance rather than waiting for illness to appear. Personal cleanliness, within the constraints we explored earlier, was encouraged not just for comfort, but for health. Clothing was washed and aired regularly when possible, and bedding might be brought on deck for exposure to sunlight and fresh air, practices that actually would reduce bacterial growth, though this mechanism wasn't understood at the time. As your body remains completely at ease, consider how ships dealt with the inevitable outbreaks that occurred despite preventative measures. When contagious disease appeared aboard, crude forms of quarantine might be implemented, with the sick gathered in a designated area to limit spread. On larger vessels, this might be a specific section below decks. On smaller pirate sloops with limited space, the best option might be creating a sheltered area on deck where the ill could receive air and light while minimizing contact with healthy crew members. Port visits presented both opportunities and dangers for ship health. Fresh food, particularly fruits and vegetables, could alleviate nutritional deficiencies like scurvy and improve overall resistance to disease. However, ports also expose crews to new pathogens from around the Atlantic world. Some captains limited shore parties to essential personnel or restricted which establishments crew members could visit, attempting to minimize exposure to disease centers, like certain taverns or brothels known for sickness among their patrons. Let the rhythm of your breathing remain slow and deep as you appreciate how these historical maritime communities developed sophisticated public health practices through practical experience, despite lacking modern medical knowledge. Their approaches to disease prevention and control, emphasizing cleanliness, ventilation, isolation of the sick, and avoiding known disease sources, paralleled principles that would later be validated by scientific understanding. For pirates operating outside conventional society, maintaining community health was not just good practice, but essential survival. Without access to established medical facilities or support from colonial authorities, these maritime outlaws relied on preventative measures and communal care of the sick to preserve the functioning of their floating societies. As your body rests in deep relaxation, let's explore another fascinating aspect of pirate life: the distinctive language and methods of communication used aboard these vessels. The specialized vocabulary, multilingual nature of pirate crews, and unique communication challenges of maritime life created a linguistic environment unlike any found on land. Imagine standing on the deck of a pirate vessel during a busy morning. The air is filled with commands, responses, and conversations that might initially sound almost like a foreign language to unaccustomed ears. Feel yourself becoming even more relaxed as you listen to the specialized maritime vocabulary that developed over centuries to address the particular needs of seafaring. The basic terminology of the ship itself formed the foundation of this specialized language. The front of the vessel was the bow rather than the front. The back was the stern rather than the rear. Moving toward the front was going forward, while moving toward the back was going aft. The left side of the ship was port, earlier called larboard, and the right side was starboard. The floor was the deck, walls were bulkheads, and the ceiling was the overhead. Take another deep breath as you consider how this specialized vocabulary extended to every aspect of the vessel. Ropes were given specific names based on their function. A rope used to control a sail might be a sheet, while one used to raise a yard or spar was a halyard. The intricate network of lines supporting the masts were shrouds and stays. These precise terms eliminated confusion in situations where quick, accurate communication could mean the difference between safety and disaster. Directional terms were equally specific. Sailors didn't look up, but rather aloft. They didn't descend stairs, but went below. Objects weren't secured with rope, but made fast. A vessel didn't simply stop, but hove to. This specialized terminology created a linguistic world that reflected the unique environment and tasks of maritime life. Feel yourself drifting peacefully as you imagine the multicultural nature of many pirate crews. A vessel might include English, French, Dutch, Spanish, Portuguese, and African sailors, creating communication challenges that required practical solutions. Historians suggest that a form of maritime pidgin developed in these mixed crews, a simplified language combining elements from multiple tongues with the specialized nautical vocabulary. This maritime lingua franca allowed basic communication across linguistic boundaries, focusing on the essential terminology needed for ship operations and daily life. Beyond vocabulary, communication aboard ship relied heavily on standardized commands and responses that could be understood amid the noise of wind, waves, and working sails. Orders would be repeated back to confirm understanding, creating a call and response pattern that ensured clarity. In battle or rough weather, where voices might be lost to greater noise, visual signals using flags or lanterns provided alternative communication methods. As your body remains completely relaxed, consider the distinctive expressions that characterized pirate speech in historical accounts and court testimonies. Terms like matey, shipmate or friend, and hearties, term of address for fellow crew members, reflected the close bonds formed in these maritime communities. The famous R associated with pirates in popular culture appears to be primarily a literary invention of later periods, though regional accents from maritime areas of Britain or the Caribbean certainly colored the speech of many historical pirates. The oath, "Shiver my timbers," expressing surprise or dismay, had practical origins in the terrifying experience of feeling a ship's wooden structure quiver after a direct hit in battle or during a storm. While likely not as common as fiction suggests, such expressions connected language directly to the material reality and dangers of life at sea. Let the rhythm of your breathing remain slow and deep as you appreciate how the unique language of piracy and seafaring reflected both practical necessity and cultural identity. Special vocabulary addressed the specific needs of maritime communication, while distinctive expressions affirmed membership in the community of those who lived by the sea. For those who joined pirate crews from outside traditional maritime backgrounds, escaped slaves, landsmen seeking adventure, or reluctant recruits, learning this specialized language was part of their initiation into a new way of life. Mastery of nautical terminology meant not just effective communication, but acceptance into the brotherhood of the sea. The echoes of this maritime language continue in our modern speech, with phrases like learning the ropes, taken aback, 3 sheets to the wind, and many others originating in the practical vocabulary of sailing ships. This linguistic legacy represents just one way that the maritime world of the golden age of piracy continues to influence our culture centuries later. As you continue to relax deeply, approaching your own peaceful slumber, let's explore an aspect of pirate life particularly relevant to our journey tonight: how these maritime outlaws managed sleep and rest in their wooden world. The sleeping arrangements and patterns aboard pirate vessels differed significantly from our modern expectations of comfort and privacy. Imagine the space below decks as night falls on a pirate sloop. The limited interior is divided into areas for different functions, with the majority of the crew sharing the main living space. Feel your own body growing heavier and more relaxed as you envision the primary sleeping arrangement used by sailors of this era: the hammock. These simple beds, made from canvas or woven netting, represented one of the most ingenious adaptations to maritime life. Suspended from hooks or beams in the ceiling, hammocks swayed with the motion of the ship rather than fighting against it, allowing sailors to sleep even in rough seas. When not in use, they could be rolled up and stowed against the walls, creating more usable space during waking hours. This efficient use of limited room enabled dozens of men to inhabit an area that would seem impossibly cramped by modern standards. Take another deep breath as you consider the practical arrangement of these sleeping quarters. Hammocks would be slung close together, often just 18 inches apart, creating a dense network of suspended bodies during sleeping hours. The sound of dozens of men breathing, occasionally snoring, and shifting in their hammocks created a constant auditory drop. Privacy was virtually non-existent, a concept that simply had no place in the communal living arrangements of maritime life. The captain and perhaps a few senior officers might enjoy the luxury of fixed bunks or platforms in their cabins, with thin mattresses filled with straw, horsehair, or other available materials. But even these privileged sleeping arrangements would seem uncomfortably firm and narrow by contemporary standards. Feel yourself drifting peacefully as you imagine the rhythms of sleep aboard these vessels. Unlike our modern pattern of 8 consecutive hours, sailors often experience sleep in shorter periods, dictated by the watch system. The typical arrangement divided the 24-hour day into 6 watches of 4 hours each, with men alternating between duty and rest. This created a pattern where most crew members would sleep in multiple shorter segments rather than a single extended period, what sleep researchers now call polyphasic sleep. The environment itself presented numerous challenges to restful slumber. The constant motion of the ship, though partially mitigated by hammocks, still affected sleep quality. Storms could make rest nearly impossible, requiring all hands to work for extended periods without opportunity for sleep. The sounds of the wooden vessel, creaking timbers, flapping canvas, water against the hull, were ever present, though most sailors eventually adapted to this auditory landscape, even finding its absence disorienting when on land. As your body remains completely at ease, consider how the climate affected sleep in different regions. In tropical waters, the heat below decks could become nearly unbearable, with limited ventilation and dozens of bodies generating additional warmth. During calm weather, some might choose to sleep on the open deck, trading privacy for cooler air. In colder latitudes, the challenge reversed, huddling together for warmth and using whatever blankets or clothing was available to ward off the chill. The practical necessity of maintaining constant vigilance meant that sleep aboard pirate vessels was never complete. Someone was always awake, keeping watch for approaching vessels, changes in weather, or potential dangers. This shared responsibility for the community's safety created a situation where collective security depended on each member fulfilling their role in the watch rotation. Let the rhythm of your breathing remain slow and deep as you appreciate how these sleep patterns shape the experience of maritime life. Historical accounts suggest that sailors developed a remarkable ability to fall asleep quickly when opportunity arose, and to function effectively with irregular rest patterns. Adaptations necessary for survival in their challenging environment. The sailor's ability to sleep amid noise, motion, and limited comfort speaks to the human capacity for adaptation, our bodies and minds adjusting to available circumstances rather than requiring ideal conditions. As you drift toward your own sleep in considerably more comfortable surroundings, appreciate this connection across centuries to those who found their rest in hammocks swaying to the rhythm of ocean waves. As your body continues to relax deeply with each breath, let's explore how individuals found themselves aboard pirate vessels during this remarkable period. The pathways into piracy were diverse, reflecting the complex circumstances and limited options available to many in the maritime world of the early 18th century. Imagine a recently captured merchant vessel. The pirate captain addresses the captured crew, offering them a choice that was relatively common during this period: join the pirate crew or face uncertain consequences. This practice, often called forced recruitment, was one significant pathway into piracy. Feel your body becoming even heavier and more relaxed as you consider the difficult decision faced by these captured sailors. While popular culture often depicts pirates as kidnapping reluctant victims, historical records suggest that many merchant sailors willingly joined pirate crews when given the opportunity. Life aboard merchant vessels was extraordinarily harsh. Wages were low and often withheld, food was poor, discipline was brutal, and voyages could last years without seeing home or family. Against this backdrop, the relative freedom and potentially greater rewards of piracy could appear as a welcome alternative rather than a frightening imposition. Take another deep breath as you consider the words of pirate Captain Samuel Bellamy, who reportedly told a captured merchant captain, "They vilify us, the scoundrels do, when there is only this difference. They rob the poor under the cover of law, forsooth, and we plunder the rich under the protection of our own courage." This sentiment captured the class consciousness that motivated many to choose piracy, a sense that conventional society offered them little justice or opportunity. For some, entry into piracy came through privateering, legal maritime raiding conducted with government authorization during wartime. Letters of marque issued by various nations allowed privately owned vessels to attack enemy shipping, keeping a portion of the captured goods as payment. When wars ended and these letters were revoked, many privateers simply continued their operations without authorization, transitioning from legal combatants to pirates in the eyes of the law. Feel yourself drifting deeper into relaxation as you consider another pathway into piracy: naval mutiny. The harsh conditions, brutal discipline, and poor compensation aboard naval vessels occasionally drove desperate crews to overcome their officers and seize control of their ships. Having committed this capital offense against naval authorities, such mutineers had little choice but to continue outside the law, often joining established pirate communities or forming new pirate crews. Some individuals sought out pirate vessels deliberately, traveling to known pirate havens like Nassau in the Bahamas or Tortuga off Hispaniola. These might include experienced sailors seeking better opportunities, individuals fleeing legal troubles or debts, or those simply attracted to the reputation for greater freedom and democracy aboard pirate ships. During the height of the Nassau Pirate Republic between 1706 and 1718, hundreds of pirates operated from this base, creating a community that actively recruited new members. As your body remains completely at ease, consider how the diversity of pirates' backgrounds shaped their communities. Among any pirate crew might be found former merchant sailors from across Europe, naval deserters, formerly enslaved Africans who had gained their freedom through various means, indigenous Caribbean people with valuable local knowledge, and occasional gentlemen fallen on hard times or seeking adventure. This diversity extended to motivation as well. While economic opportunities certainly drove many to piracy, the prospect of wealth unavailable through legitimate maritime employment, others were equally motivated by resistance to authority, desire for personal freedom, or escape from oppressive circumstances. For formerly enslaved individuals, pirate vessels offered rare spaces where they might serve as equals rather than property, their skills valued above their origin or skin color. Let the rhythm of your breathing remain slow and deep as you appreciate the complexity of these motivations. Rather than simple criminality, piracy often represented a rational choice among limited options for those at the margins of early modern society. In creating their floating communities governed by elected captains and written articles of agreement, pirates were not merely rejecting conventional authority, but attempting to construct alternative social arrangements that offered them greater dignity and self-determination. As we continue our exploration of life aboard these vessels, keep in mind this essential context. That for many who sailed under the black flag, piracy represented not just a criminal enterprise, but a deliberate choice of lifestyle in a world that offered them few other paths to freedom or prosperity. As your body continues to relax deeply, let's examine more closely the construction and anatomy of the pirate vessels themselves. These wooden ships were remarkable feats of engineering, representing centuries of accumulated knowledge about how to create structures that could withstand the immense forces of wind and water while housing dozens of men for months at sea. Imagine yourself approaching a shipyard in a colonial port like Port Royal or Nassau. The distinctive smell of freshly cut timber mingles with the aroma of hot pitch and tar. The sound of hammers, saws, and the shouts of shipwrights creates a busy atmosphere of creation. Feel yourself becoming even more relaxed as you observe the complex process of shipbuilding that created these vessels. While pirates rarely built their own ships, preferring to capture them instead, understanding ship construction helps us appreciate the floating environment they inhabited. A typical vessel that might fall into pirate hands was the sloop, a relatively small, fast ship with a single mast carrying fore and aft rigged sails. Popular in the Caribbean, sloops typically ranged from 50 to 100 tons, with a length of 40 to 60 feet, and could be handled by a small crew of 20 to 75 men. Take another deep breath as you visualize the skeletal beginning of such a vessel. The keel, a massive timber running the length of the ship from bow to stern, forms the literal backbone of the construction. To this central piece are attached the frames or ribs, curved wooden members that define the hull's shape. Shipwrights would select specific trees, often oak, whose natural curves matched the required shapes for these critical components. The outer hull was formed by attaching planks horizontally to these frames, a process called planking. These planks were carefully shaped to fit together tightly, their edges often treated with oakum, a material made from unraveled rope fibers mixed with pitch, before being driven together. The resulting seams were caulked with more oakum and sealed with hot pitch to create a watertight shell. Multiple layers of planking might be applied to create a stronger hull, with the grain running in different directions for additional strength. Feel yourself drifting peacefully as you imagine the intricate wooden world that resulted from this meticulous process. Inside the hull, deck beams spanned from side to side, supporting the planking that created the various decks and compartments. Larger vessels might have multiple decks, the main deck open to the sky, a gun deck where cannons were mounted, and lower decks for storage and accommodation. The internal spaces were divided by bulkheads, wooden walls that created separate areas for different functions. At the stern, the most privileged space was the captain's cabin, often featuring windows that allowed light and air. Nearby might be a small room serving as the navigation center, where charts were studied and the ship's course plotted. The main body of the vessel contained spaces for the crew to sleep, work, and eat, while the forward areas typically housed storage for food, water, and other essential supplies. As your body becomes completely relaxed, consider the remarkable fact that every component of these vessels was shaped by hand, using tools that would seem primitive by modern standards. Master shipwrights passed their knowledge through apprenticeship rather than formal education, carrying techniques developed over generations. The resulting vessels were not just transportation, but works of craftsmanship that combined functionality, durability, and even beauty. Above the hull rose the masts, tall wooden spars that supported the sails, providing the ship's power. A single-masted sloop was common for smaller pirate vessels, while larger ships might utilize the two-masted brigantine design or the three-masted ship rig. These masts were not single pieces, but composed of sections joined together, as finding single trees of sufficient height and straightness was nearly impossible. The largest ships of the line might have main masts assembled from up to 3 sections, rising over 100 feet above the deck. Let the rhythm of your breathing become even more gentle as you imagine the complex web of rigging that surrounded these masts. Standing rigging, composed of heavy ropes called shrouds and stays, held the masts in position against the tremendous force of wind in the sails. Running rigging, an intricate system of ropes, blocks, pulleys, and tackles, allowed the crew to control the sails, adjusting their position to harness the wind's power. The sails themselves were massive sheets of canvas, hand-sewn with incredible strength to withstand the constant strain of wind. Different types of sails served different purposes. Square sails set perpendicular to the ship's length provided power when running before the wind, while fore and aft sails allowed better performance when sailing across or even against the wind direction. Everywhere you looked aboard such a vessel, you would see the results of practical problem-solving and ingenious use of available materials. Every feature had evolved through centuries of maritime experience to serve specific functions, creating a self-contained world optimized for survival on the unforgiving ocean. As you continue to relax deeply, appreciate how this complex wooden environment shaped the experiences of those who lived within it. The constant motion, the omnipresent sounds of creaking timber and canvas, the limited space, and the need for constant maintenance created a distinctive way of life found nowhere else in the early modern world. Before we explore life aboard the ships themselves, let's take a moment to understand why the golden age of piracy emerged when it did. As you continue to relax deeply, allowing each breath to carry you further into comfort, consider the historical forces that created this unique moment in maritime history. The late 17th and early 18th centuries represented a period of significant transition. The great European powers, England, France, Spain, the Netherlands, and Portugal, were engaged in an intense competition for colonial possessions and trade routes. This imperial rivalry created perfect conditions for piracy to flourish, as each nation tacitly encouraged attacks on their competitors' shipping while attempting to protect their own. Feel your body becoming heavier as you imagine the vast Atlantic world of this period. The Spanish Empire had established an extensive network of colonies in the Americas, extracting enormous wealth in silver and gold that traveled back to Europe in treasure fleets. The English, French, and Dutch were developing plantation economies in the Caribbean, producing valuable commodities like sugar, tobacco, and indigo. Between these colonial outposts and European markets flowed a constant stream of ships carrying precious cargoes, tempting targets for those who operated outside the law. Take another deep breath as you consider how the frequent wars of this period contributed to the rise of piracy. The War of the Spanish Succession, 1701 to 1714, the War of the Quadruple Alliance, 1718 to 1720, and numerous smaller conflicts meant that European powers issued letters of marque to privateers, privately owned vessels authorized to attack enemy shipping. These privateers operated legally during wartime, but when peace treaties were signed, thousands of experienced mariners with specialized combat skills suddenly found themselves unemployed. For many of these former privateers, the transition to piracy was a natural one. They possessed the necessary ships, weapons, and maritime knowledge, and had become accustomed to a more profitable and autonomous lifestyle than regular naval or merchant service offered. The end of the War of the Spanish Succession in 1714 particularly contributed to a surge in piracy as former privateers sought to maintain their livelihoods. As your body continues to relax completely, consider also the economic factors that drove men to piracy. Life for common sailors in both merchant and naval vessels was extraordinarily harsh. Wages were low and often withheld, discipline was brutal, and mortality rates were high due to disease, malnutrition, and dangerous working conditions. Naval press gangs forced men into service against their will, while merchant sailors might find themselves effectively enslaved through debt or unscrupulous captains. Against this backdrop, piracy offered not just potential wealth, but a degree of freedom and agency unavailable in legitimate maritime employment. The democratic practices aboard pirate vessels, where captains were elected and major decisions made collectively, represented a radical alternative to the strict hierarchy and often abusive authority found on naval and merchant ships. Feel yourself drifting deeper into relaxation as you appreciate how geography also shaped the development of piracy. The Caribbean, with its thousands of islands, hidden coves, shallow reefs, and complex coastlines, provided perfect terrain for those wishing to evade authorities. The distance from European capitals meant that colonial governance was often weak, corrupt, or simply absent, creating spaces where alternative communities could develop beyond the reach of state control. The transatlantic slave trade, one of the most significant economic enterprises of this period, also influenced the development of piracy. Some pirates attacked slave ships to seize human cargo for ransom or sale, while others, particularly those operating from bases like Madagascar, incorporated formerly enslaved individuals into their crews as equals, offering a rare path to freedom in an era of expanding slavery. Let the weight of your body sink deeper into relaxation as you begin to understand that piracy during this period was not simply random criminality, but a complex response to the economic, political, and social conditions of a world in transition. These maritime outlaws existed in the spaces between empires, taking advantage of imperial rivalries, geographic complexity, and economic opportunity to create alternate ways of life on the margins of an expanding global system. With this context in mind, let us now turn our attention to the vessels themselves, the floating worlds that carried these diverse communities across the oceans of the early modern world. Life aboard pirate ships in the golden age of piracy. The period we're exploring tonight was an era when the great empires of Europe extended their reach across the seas, when merchant vessels laden with treasure crisscrossed the Atlantic, and when those who lived outside the law found freedom on the rolling waves. But beyond the romanticized tales and fearsome legends lies the fascinating reality of daily life aboard these floating communities. As you continue to relax, imagine the gentle rocking of a ship beneath you, the distant call of seabirds, and the soft creaking of wooden timbers. These were the constant companions of those who made their lives at sea during this remarkable chapter of maritime history. The rhythmic sound of waves against the wooden hull creates a natural lullaby, a constant backdrop to life at sea that perhaps explains why sailors often spoke of the ocean as having a hypnotic quality. Feel that gentle rhythm now as your breathing naturally synchronizes with it, your chest rising and falling like the swells of a calm sea. In this journey, we'll explore the complex world that existed on these vessels, not the simplified, romanticized version that has come down to us through Hollywood films, but the nuanced reality of communities that created their own rules, cultures, and ways of life. Pirates were not simply criminals. They were people responding to the harsh realities of their time, creating alternative societies with their own codes of conduct and systems of governance. As your muscles begin to loosen and your mind starts to calm, picture yourself as an observer to this historical moment, neither glorifying nor condemning these maritime outlaws, but simply witnessing their remarkable adaptation to life at sea. The wooden vessel beneath you represents both prison and freedom, the confined space that limited their physical movement, but also carried them beyond the reach of authorities who would restrict their liberty in other ways. Let your mind drift now as we explore not just the adventures and conflicts of pirate life, but the everyday moments, the ingenious solutions to maritime challenges, and the complex social world that existed aboard these vessels of freedom and infamy. Allow the gentle rocking motion to carry you deeper into relaxation as we begin our historical journey across the centuries. As your body continues to relax deeply, picture yourself approaching a pirate vessel anchored in a secluded bay. The early morning mist is just beginning to lift, revealing the silhouette of what mariners of the time might call a sloop or perhaps a brigantine. Unlike the massive warships of naval powers, pirates often preferred smaller, faster vessels that could outrun larger ships and navigate shallow waters. The ship before you might have once been a merchant vessel or perhaps even a navy ship, captured and repurposed for its current role. Pirates rarely built their own ships, instead taking what they needed through force or circumstance. This particular vessel has weathered many storms, its wooden hull bearing the marks of its journeys, patches of newer wood among the weathered planks, barnacles clustering near the waterline, the occasional scorch mark from past conflicts. Feel your breathing becoming slower and deeper as you imagine drawing closer. The smell of salt and tar grows stronger, that distinctive aroma of wooden ships that permeated every fiber and surface. Tar was essential, used liberally to seal the ship against the relentless invasion of seawater. Without constant maintenance, a wooden ship would quickly succumb to the very element that bore it. Take another deep breath in and out, allowing yourself to relax even further as we step aboard this floating world, this community separated from land-bound society. The main deck stretches before you, surprisingly cramped compared to how ships appear in modern films. Every inch of space served a purpose, with hatches leading to the spaces below and rigging extending upward to control the complex arrangement of sails. The wooden planks beneath your feet have been worn smooth by countless footsteps, appearing almost polished in places. Unlike naval vessels with their rigid organization and specialized spaces, pirate ships modified their layouts for their particular needs. The captain's quarters, while still private, might be less grandiose than on a naval vessel. After all, pirate captains ruled by the consent of their crew rather than by military authority. As you continue to relax, notice how the ship gently rises and falls with the rhythm of the waves. This constant motion became so familiar to sailors that many reported difficulty sleeping on land after long voyages, missing the rocking cradle of their floating home. Let that gentle rocking motion carry you deeper into relaxation as you begin to understand that this ship was more than just a vessel. It was a self-contained world for its inhabitants, a community with its own rules, customs, and hierarchies. As the sun rises higher in our historical imagination, the deck begins to come alive with activity. The pirate crew emerges from below decks, a diverse collection of individuals unlike anything typically seen on naval or merchant vessels of the time. Allow yourself to relax even deeper as you observe these men and occasionally women who have chosen or been forced into this life at sea. Unlike the common perception, pirate crews were remarkably diverse. Here you might see former sailors from across Europe, English, Dutch, French, and Spanish men working side by side despite their nations being at war. Former slaves from Africa who had either escaped or been freed during pirate raids moved among the crew as equals. Indigenous people from the Caribbean and the Americas sometimes joined these floating societies. Even the occasional nobleman fallen on hard times might be found among their ranks. This diversity was unusual for the rigid societies of the 17th and early 18th centuries. While prejudices certainly existed aboard pirate vessels, the practical demands of survival at sea often transcended the strict social hierarchies found on land. A skilled navigator or fighter was valuable regardless of origin, and pirates could ill afford to reject capable hands based solely on background. As you continue to relax deeply, imagine the sounds of this multilingual community. Accents and languages mixing in a maritime pidgin that allowed communication among this diverse group. The common language of the sea united them, with specialized terminology for the various parts of the ship and the tasks required to sail it. What might surprise you most as you drift deeper into relaxation is the relatively democratic nature of this outlaw society. While the captain held absolute authority during chase and combat, most other decisions were made by collective agreement. The crew elected their captain and other officers and could remove them if they proved incompetent or tyrannical. This was a stark contrast to naval vessels where captains were appointed by distant authorities and held power regardless of the crew's opinions. Take another deep breath, feeling your body becoming heavier and more relaxed as you consider how revolutionary this social arrangement was for its time. Centuries before democratic governance became commonplace on land, these maritime outlaws created a system where common sailors had a voice in decisions that affected their lives. Each member of the crew signed or marked the ship's articles, a document outlining the rules of conduct, division of plunder, and compensation for injuries. These articles varied from ship to ship, but generally ensured that the spoils of their activities were divided more equitably than the meager wages offered aboard merchant and naval vessels. For injuries sustained in service to the ship, pirates received compensation, perhaps 600 pieces of 8 for a lost right arm, 500 for a left arm, 400 for a right leg, and so on. This primitive insurance policy was quite progressive for an era when injured sailors might simply be abandoned at the next port. As you continue to relax, notice how your breathing has naturally calm, steady rhythm, much like the dependable pad of watches that governed life aboard ship. As you sink deeper into comfortable relaxation, let's explore the daily rhythms that governed life aboard a pirate vessel. Despite their reputation for lawlessness, pirate ships maintained surprisingly ordered routines, necessary for the efficient operation of their floating home. The day began early, around dawn, as the night watch changed, and the majority of the crew stirred from their hammocks. Feel your own body becoming heavier as you imagine these sailors waking to the gentle swaying of their suspended canvas beds. Hammocks were a brilliant innovation for sleeping aboard ship. They moved with the vessel's motion rather than fighting against it, and when not in use, they could be rolled up to create more space in the crowded quarters below deck. The first task of the day was often the cleaning of the ship, or holy stoning the decks, named for the sandstone blocks used to scrub the wooden planks, which were sometimes repurposed from gravestones, hence holy stones. Imagine the rhythmic sound of scrubbing and the smell of damp wood as sailors on hands and knees maintained their vessel. This cleanliness wasn't merely about appearances, but was essential for the health of both ship and crew. Rotting wood or accumulated grime could lead to structural weaknesses or disease in the close confines of the vessel. As your body continues to relax completely, envision the changing of the watch, a practice that ensured the ship was always under supervision. The ship's bell would ring to mark the passing of each half hour in a 4-hour watch. 8 bells signaled the end of one watch and the beginning of another, a sound that punctuated the sailor's existence. This system created a reliable rhythm to shipboard life, ensuring that duties were fairly distributed and that everyone received necessary rest. The helmsman would maintain the ship's course, hands steady on the great wooden wheel, feeling the ocean's mood through the pressure against the rudder. Lookouts perched high in the crow's nest, scanning the horizon for sails, land, or potential danger. The ship's carpenter made continuous rounds, listening for unusual sounds and checking for leaks or damage. The cook and his assistants would work at the brick firebox called the galley, preparing the day's meals for dozens of hungry men. Take another deep breath now, allowing yourself to relax even more deeply as you consider how these routine tasks created a sense of purpose and community. Far from the chaotic image often portrayed, successful pirate ships operated with discipline and cooperation. While they rejected the harsh authority of naval command, they embraced the necessary order that seafaring demanded. Meals provided important social time and marked the passage of the day. The crew would typically eat twice, and a larger meal around midday and a lighter one in the evening. Unlike naval vessels where officers ate separately from common sailors, pirates often dined together, though the captain and officers might have better quality provisions or more generous portions. As the day progressed, men not occupied with sailing the vessel might mend clothing, repair equipment, practice with weapons, or engage in games of chance. Some would fish off the sides of the ship, supplementing the preserved provisions with fresh catch. Let your mind drift peacefully as you imagine the sun beginning to set over this maritime world. The sky transforms into brilliant colors reflected on the water's surface. The evening watch takes their positions as lanterns are lit, casting a warm glow across the darkening deck. Below, off-duty sailors might gather to share stories, sing sea shanties, or simply enjoy a ration of rum before retiring to their hammocks. Feel yourself becoming even more relaxed as you appreciate the rhythm of this life, governed by the needs of the ship, the patterns of daylight, and the eternal motion of the sea. There is something deeply soothing about these cycles, these predictable patterns amid the uncertainty of life at sea. As you continue to relax more deeply with each breath, let's turn our attention to one of the most fascinating figures aboard a pirate vessel, the captain. Unlike the popular image of the all-powerful tyrant ruling through fear, the reality of pirate leadership was far more complex and in many ways more interesting. Imagine now that the crew has gathered on the main deck for a meeting or moot. The captain stands slightly apart, perhaps distinguished by somewhat finer clothing or a particularly notable hat, the source of the famous captain's hat in maritime lore. But what's remarkable is not the trappings of authority, but how that authority is maintained. Feel your muscles loosening and your mind growing calmer as you envision this unusual leadership dynamic. The pirate captain held power through a delicate balance of charisma, competence, and consent. Unlike naval captains who received their authority from distant admiralties, pirate captains were elected by their crews and could be deposed if they failed to serve the common interest. During normal sailing and daily operations, the captain's word was generally followed without question. Efficient ship operation required clear command. But when it came to important decisions like choosing targets, determining routes, or deciding whether to attack a particular vessel, many captains would consult with the crew or at least with the ship's council of officers. Take another deep breath now, releasing any remaining tension as you consider the remarkable Bartholomew Roberts, known as Black Bart, one of the most successful pirates of the Golden Age. His ship's articles, the pirate code that governed life aboard his vessels, explicitly stated the captain and quartermaster to receive 2 shares of a prize, the master, boatswain, and gunner, 1 share and a half, and other officers, 1 1/4. This transparent division of spoils was revolutionary for its time. The captain's quarters, located at the stern of the ship beneath the quarterdeck, offered rare privacy in the crowded world of a sailing vessel. Here, the captain might keep the ship's charts, navigational instruments, logbooks, and perhaps a few personal luxuries. But even this space was not entirely private. Captains often had to share their quarters with other officers or use the space for meetings with the ship's council. Feel yourself drifting deeper into relaxation as you imagine one of history's famous pirate captains. Perhaps it's the strategic and restrained Captain Samuel Bellamy, known for his relatively merciful treatment of captives, who called himself Robin Hood of the Sea. Or maybe the fearsome Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard, who cultivated a terrifying image by weaving slow-burning fuses into his beard during battle, surrounding himself with smoke and giving the impression of a demonic figure. These captains understood something profound about leadership. That authority maintained through respect and mutual benefit often proved stronger than that imposed through fear alone. The most successful pirate captains were those who could balance the individual freedom that drew many to piracy with the discipline required to operate a ship and survive in a hostile world. As your body continues to relax completely, consider how revolutionary this leadership model was for its time, creating a space where common sailors had a voice in governance centuries before such rights became common on land. This is not to romanticize piracy, which was often brutal and violent, but to recognize the complexity of these floating societies that operated beyond the reach of traditional authority. Let the gentle rhythm of your breathing match the imagined swaying of the ship as we continue our exploration of life aboard these remarkable vessels. As you continue to relax deeply, let's explore another crucial role aboard a pirate vessel, one that had few parallels in legitimate shipping of the era. The quartermaster served as a counterbalance to the captain's authority and represented the interests of the common crew. Imagine the quartermaster moving about the ship, a respected figure who might not immediately stand out from the rest of the crew in appearance, but whose authority was understood by all. While the captain commanded the ship during chase and battle, it was the quartermaster who maintained discipline, settled minor disputes, and oversaw the division of provisions and plunder. Feel your body becoming even heavier and more comfortable as you envision this unique officer going about his duties. When a prize was captured, it was the quartermaster who led the boarding party and supervised the collection and documentation of valuable goods. He kept meticulous records of what was taken and ensured fair distribution according to the ship's articles. This role required both physical courage during combat and the trust of the crew regarding fair treatment. The quartermaster also held judicial power aboard ship. Minor infractions might be settled directly by his judgment, while more serious matters would be brought before the entire crew for consideration. This separation of powers between captain and quartermaster created a system of checks and balances that prevented any single individual from assuming too much control. Take another deep breath, allowing yourself to sink deeper into relaxation as you consider how this arrangement differed from traditional ships. On naval vessels, discipline flowed downward from the captain, with little recourse for common sailors. On pirate ships, the crew had representation through their elected quartermaster, who could advocate for their interests and concerns. One historical quartermaster who rose to command was John Rackham, better known as Calico Jack, for his colorful clothing. He served as quartermaster under Charles Vane before the crew became dissatisfied with Vane's leadership. In a demonstration of the democratic processes aboard pirate vessels, Vane was voted out of his captaincy for showing cowardice, and Rackham was elected captain in his place. As you rest peacefully in this relaxed state, consider how the relationship between captain and quartermaster embodied the pirate's paradoxical commitment to both individual freedom and collective governance. These ships operated with a clear understanding that authority was granted by the community rather than imposed from above, a radical notion in an age of monarchies and rigid social hierarchies. Feel your breathing becoming slower and deeper as you appreciate this aspect of pirate life that is often overlooked in popular accounts. The social organization aboard these vessels represented both a practical adaptation to the demands of their criminal enterprise and a rejection of the oppressive conditions many had experienced aboard merchant and naval ships. Let this understanding gently guide you deeper into relaxation as we continue our exploration of life during the golden age of piracy. As you rest in this deeply relaxed state, let's explore one of the most fascinating aspects of pirate society, the codes that govern their floating communities. Despite their outlaw status, pirates created and lived by surprisingly orderly systems of rules, embodied in documents known as Articles of Agreement, or simply the Code. Imagine the crew gathered as a new member joins their ranks. Before him is placed a document, perhaps written in flowing script on weathered parchment, or maybe roughly inscribed on a simple piece of paper. This is the ship's articles, the binding agreement that every crew member must sign or mark upon joining the vessel. Feel yourself becoming even more relaxed as you envision this ceremony of commitment, a ritual that formalized one's entry into the pirate community. These articles varied from ship to ship, but they typically outlined several key areas: conduct aboard ship, division of plunder, compensation for injuries, and punishments for violations. The Articles of Bartholomew Roberts, one of the most successful pirates of the era, have survived to give us insight into these codes. Every man has a vote in affairs of moment. This democratic principle ensured that major decisions were made collectively rather than by the captain alone. Every man shall have an equal share in the fresh provisions and strong liquors, and may use them at pleasure unless a scarcity makes it necessary for the common good to ration them. This addressed the fair distribution of consumable goods. The lights and candles are to be put out at 8 at night. If any of the crew desire to drink after that hour, they are to do it on the open deck. This simple safety measure prevented fire, one of the greatest dangers aboard wooden ships. No man shall game with dice or cards for money. Gambling could lead to serious conflicts among the crew, threatening the harmony necessary for survival. No striking one another on board, but quarrels to be ended on shore by sword or pistol. Disputes were to be resolved in a regulated manner, rather than through impulsive violence that might endanger the ship. Feel your body growing heavier and more relaxed as you consider the wisdom contained in these rules. For men living in close quarters under stressful conditions, clear expectations and consequences created necessary order. Far from being lawless, pirates created their own legal systems, rejected the laws they found unjust, and embraced those they deemed necessary for their community's functioning. One particularly notable feature of many pirate codes was the provision for injured crew members. When a pirate was wounded in service to the ship, he received compensation from the common fund before the regular division of plunder. The amount varied according to the severity of the injury. A lost right arm might receive 600 pieces of 8, a left arm 500, an eye 100, and so forth. This primitive insurance policy recognized the dangers of their profession and the brotherhood that bound them together. As you continue to relax deeply, consider how these articles represented both practical solutions to the challenges of maritime life and an expression of values that many pirates held. They rejected the harsh discipline and poor compensation of legitimate shipping while embracing communal responsibility and regulated freedom. These were men, and occasionally women, who had chosen to place themselves outside conventional society, yet they recognized the need for social organization. In creating their articles, pirates demonstrated an understanding that true freedom requires not an absence of rules, but the creation of just ones with the consent of those who live under them. Let this fascinating contradiction guide you even deeper into peaceful relaxation as we continue our journey through the golden age of piracy. As you continue to rest in deep relaxation, let's turn our attention to a fundamental aspect of daily life aboard pirate ships: the food and drink that sustained these maritime communities. The challenges of preserving food at sea led to distinctive culinary practices that shaped the pirate experience. Imagine the ship's cook, often a skilled position held by an older or disabled sailor who could no longer manage the physical demands of regular duties, working at the brick-lined galley. The galley fire represents one of the few sources of heat aboard ship, a gathering point where sailors might warm themselves on cold mornings before beginning their duties. The smell of wood smoke mingles with the aromas of cooking food, creating a sensory center to the vessel. Feel yourself relaxing even more deeply as you consider the dietary staples of maritime life. The foundation of shipboard nutrition was ship's biscuit or hardtack, dense, dry crackers made from flour, water, and sometimes salt. Baked until extremely hard, these biscuits could last for months or even years without spoiling, though they often became infested with weevils or other insects during long voyages. Sailors would typically dunk them in their beverage to soften them enough to eat without damaging their teeth. Take another slow, deep breath as you envision the challenges of food preservation in an era before refrigeration. Meat was preserved through salting, smoking, or pickling. Salt beef and salt pork were standard provisions, stored in barrels, and often so heavily preserved that they required extended soaking before becoming edible. Fish might be caught fresh when opportunities arose, providing welcome variety and nutrition. Various legumes like beans and peas could be dried and stored for long periods, forming an important source of protein when meat supplies ran low. These would be cooked into stews or porridges, sometimes flavored with whatever herbs or spices might be available. Dried fruits, particularly raisins and prunes, provided essential vitamins and were less likely to spoil than fresh varieties. Feel your body becoming completely relaxed as you consider how pirates, with their irregular lifestyle and opportunities to seize merchant vessels, often enjoyed better provisioning than naval or merchant sailors. When they captured a ship carrying luxury food items, sugar, chocolate, exotic spices, or fine wines, the crew would indulge in these rare treats, enjoying momentary glimpses of culinary pleasure typically reserved for the wealthy. Water was the most precious resource aboard ship, carried in wooden casks that would eventually develop algae and become foul-tasting. This led to the famous preference for alcoholic beverages, not merely for their intoxicating effects, but because alcohol preserved the liquid from spoilage. Grog, a mixture of rum diluted with water and sometimes flavored with lemon juice and sugar, became a staple aboard many vessels. The alcohol killed some pathogens, while the citrus helped prevent scurvy, though this benefit wasn't scientifically understood at the time. As you drift peacefully in this state of relaxation, imagine the social aspect of meals aboard ship. Unlike naval vessels where officers dined separately from common sailors, pirates often ate together, reinforcing their egalitarian ethos. Mealtime provided structure to the day and opportunities for socializing, storytelling, and building the bonds that helped these diverse crews function as cohesive units. Caribbean pirates sometimes adopted food practices from the regions they frequented, incorporating tropical fruits, local herbs, and cooking techniques from indigenous peoples or African culinary traditions brought by formerly enslaved crew members. This culinary mixing mirrored the diverse nature of pirate crews themselves. Let the rhythm of your breathing remain calm, and even as you appreciate how these practical aspects of sustenance shape the daily experience of life at sea. In many ways, the quality and quantity of food and drink aboard determine not just health and morale, but the very ability of a vessel to continue its operations. Allow yourself to relax even more deeply as we explore one of the most challenging aspects of maritime life during the golden age of piracy: health and medical care. In an era before modern medicine, when the germ theory of disease was unknown and antiseptics non-existent, Illness and injury at sea presented grave dangers. Imagine the ship's surgeon at work in the cramped space below decks designated as the sick bay. Unlike physicians who trained at universities, ship's surgeons were often barbers who had learned their craft through apprenticeship. Their primary skills were practical: setting bones, amputating limbs, extracting teeth, and treating wounds. Feel your body becoming heavier and more relaxed as you envision this medical practitioner, respected for his essential skills despite lacking formal education. The surgeon's tools were simple but specialized: bone saws for amputations, cauterizing irons to seal wounds and prevent bleeding, probes for removing foreign objects, and various knives and needles for surgical procedures. These operations were performed without anesthesia beyond rum or brandy to dull the patient's senses. Speed was considered a surgeon's greatest virtue, as a swift amputation caused less suffering than a slow one. Take a deep, cleansing breath as you consider the common health challenges faced by those who lived at sea. Scurvy, caused by vitamin C deficiency, was perhaps the most notorious. After several weeks without fresh fruits or vegetables, sailors would begin to experience fatigue, sore gums, loose teeth, and eventually reopened wounds and death. Though the specific cause wasn't understood, some captains observed that citrus fruits seemed to prevent the condition, leading to the occasional inclusion of lemons or limes in ship's provisions when possible. Other common ailments included dysentery from contaminated water or food, various fevers contracted in tropical ports, and infections from even minor wounds. The crowded conditions aboard ship allowed disease to spread rapidly, sometimes decimating crews in a matter of days. Feel yourself relaxing completely as you imagine the preventative measures and folk remedies used aboard pirate vessels. Vinegar was sprinkled throughout the ship as a disinfectant. Sulfur was burned below decks to fumigate the space and drive out rats and insects that might carry disease. Various herbal preparations were used to treat specific symptoms: ginger for nausea, willow bark for pain and fever, honey for wound dressing. Pirates operating in the Caribbean often incorporated medical knowledge from African and indigenous healing traditions, sometimes with greater success than European approaches. Plant-based poultices, herbal teas, and other natural remedies expanded the medical arsenal available to these maritime communities. As your body continues to sink deeper into relaxation, consider how the Articles of Agreement on many pirate ships included provisions for those injured in service to the vessel. This early form of disability insurance recognized the constant dangers of their profession and created a safety net for crew members who suffered debilitating injuries. The physical demands of sailing took a toll, even without acute injury or illness. Calloused hands from working with ropes, weathered skin from constant exposure to sun and salt, and various repetitive stress injuries were simply accepted as the natural consequences of life at sea. Many sailors developed a distinctive gait from years of walking on shifting decks, appearing to sway slightly even when on solid ground. Let your mind drift peacefully as you appreciate the resilience of those who face these health challenges with limited resources and knowledge. Their innovations and adaptations, from preventative measures to community care for the injured, represent an important chapter in the history of maritime medicine. As you continue to rest in this deeply relaxed state, we'll explore the more dangerous aspects of pirate life, the weapons and combat tactics that define their profession. While popular culture often romanticizes pirate battles, the reality was that most successful pirates preferred intimidation to actual fighting, as combat risked damage to their vessel, injury to their crew, and potential damage to valuable cargo. Imagine the preparations aboard ship as a potential prize is spotted on the horizon. The atmosphere transforms from the routine of daily sailing to focused readiness. Weapons are distributed from the locked armory, gun crews take their positions, and the ship adjusts its course for pursuit. Feel your body remaining completely relaxed as you envision this scene of controlled tension. The primary large weapons aboard pirate vessels were cannons, cast iron tubes mounted on wooden carriages that could fire various projectiles. Contrary to popular depictions, most pirate ships carried relatively few cannons compared to naval warships, as they valued speed and maneuverability over raw firepower. These weapons required skilled teams to operate effectively, with specific crew members responsible for loading, aiming, and firing in a carefully choreographed sequence. Take another deep breath as you consider the strategy behind pirate attacks. The goal was typically not to sink the target vessel, but to capture it intact with its cargo. Shots might be directed at the target's sails and rigging to slow it down, or a warning shot might be fired across its bow as a demonstration of capability and intent. The fearsome Jolly Roger flag would be raised to signal that the pirates would show mercy if the merchant surrendered without resistance, but would give no quarter if they chose to fight. The psychological aspect of pirate combat cannot be overstated. The reputation for brutality that preceded infamous captains like Blackbeard often led merchant vessels to surrender without firing a shot. Edward Teach, Blackbeard, was known to place slow-burning fuses in his hair and beard before battle, surrounding himself with smoke to create a terrifying demonic appearance that unnerved his opponents. Feel yourself drifting deeper into relaxation as you imagine the personal weapons carried by pirates during boarding actions. Cutlasses, short, slightly curved swords, were preferred for their effectiveness in the confined spaces of ship-to-ship combat. Unlike longer military swords, cutlasses could be wielded effectively on crowded decks and below decks in narrow passages. Firearms of the period included flintlock pistols, often carried in multiples since they could only fire a single shot before requiring a lengthy reloading process. Some pirates would sling several loaded pistols across their chests on ribbons or ropes, allowing them to fire multiple shots in quick succession. Blunderbusses, short, large-bore firearms that could be loaded with multiple projectiles, were effective at close range, particularly for clearing crowded decks. As your body remains completely at ease, consider how boarding actions typically unfolded. Grappling hooks would be thrown to draw the vessels together, and pirates would swarm aboard the merchant ship using the element of surprise and intimidation to overcome resistance. The goal was quick surrender with minimal bloodshed, not out of mercy, though some captains were known for more humane treatment than others, but because wounded or killed merchantmen couldn't assist in handling their vessel and cargo. The diverse backgrounds of pirate crew members often brought varied fighting techniques aboard. Former naval sailors might be skilled with conventional European weapons, while others brought expertise in knife fighting, wrestling, or martial techniques from Africa, the Caribbean, or Asia. This diversity of combat methods could provide an advantage against more traditionally trained opponents. Let the rhythm of your breathing remain slow and deep as you reflect on how the threat of violence, rather than its continuous application, defined successful piracy. The most effective pirate captains built fearsome reputations that did much of their work for them, allowing them to take prizes with minimal risk to their crews and vessels. As you continue to relax completely, let's explore a subject that has captured the imagination for centuries: the treasure and plunder that motivated those who sailed under the black flag. While popular culture often depicts pirates seeking chests overflowing with gold coins and jewels, the reality of pirate plunder was typically more practical and diverse. Imagine yourself aboard ship as a recently captured merchant vessel is being systematically emptied of valuable goods. The quartermaster oversees this operation, keeping careful records of what is taken, as the distribution of plunder was governed by the ship's articles. Feel your body becoming ever more relaxed as you envision this organized process, far from the chaotic looting often depicted in fiction. The most valued prizes were not necessarily gold and silver, but practical goods that could be easily transported and sold. Trade goods like textiles, spices, sugar, tobacco, and cocoa were highly prized. These commodities could be sold quickly in ports where few questions were asked about their origin, converted to currency, and divided among the crew according to their shares. Take another deep breath, allowing yourself to sink deeper into relaxation as you consider the items pirates sought for their own use. Essential naval stores, rope, canvas, timber, and tar, extended the operational life of their vessel. Medical supplies, navigational instruments, and tools were immediately useful aboard ship. Food and drink, particularly luxury items like fine wines or exotic foods, provided immediate gratification and improved morale. Weapons and ammunition were always in demand, as were skilled craftsmen who might be convinced or coerced to join the pirate crew. A carpenter, surgeon, or navigator might be more valuable than a hold full of goods if the pirates were in need of those particular skills. Of course, currency and precious metals were taken when available. Spanish pieces of 8, silver coins minted in the Americas became a standard unit of account throughout the maritime world. Gold coins from various nations, silver plate, and jewelry could be easily transported and either spent or melted down to disguise their origin. Feel yourself drifting peacefully as you imagine the fair division of these spoils according to the ship's articles. A typical arrangement might allocate 2 shares to the captain, 1.5 shares to the quartermaster and other officers, and 1 share to each regular crew member. This relatively egalitarian distribution contrasted sharply with merchant and naval vessels where common sailors received minimal wages while owners and officers claimed the vast majority of profits. The legend of buried pirate treasure, while compelling, has little historical basis. Pirates generally spent their wealth quickly in port on food, drink, gambling, and companionship, rather than accumulating and hiding it. The rare exceptions, like Captain William Kidd's buried treasure on Gardiner's Island, which was recovered shortly after its burial, became the exceptional cases that fueled centuries of treasure hunting fantasies. As your body remains completely at ease, consider how the division of plunder represented the pirate community's values, their rejection of the extreme inequality found in legitimate maritime trade, and their creation of a more equitable economic system, albeit one based on theft. For many common sailors who had experienced exploitation aboard merchant or naval vessels, the opportunity to receive a fair share of profits represented not just financial opportunity, but dignity and respect. Let this understanding gently guide you deeper into relaxation as we continue exploring the complex reality behind the romantic myths of the golden age of piracy. Allow yourself to drift even deeper into relaxation as we explore the fascinating world of navigation and seamanship during the golden age of piracy. In an era before GPS, radar, or even reliable charts, finding one's way across the vast oceans required remarkable skill, specialized knowledge, and tools that seem almost mystical to modern observers. Imagine the navigation station aboard a pirate vessel, perhaps a small table near the captain's quarters, where precious navigational instruments are kept in wooden boxes lined with velvet or soft cloth to protect them from the constant motion of the ship. Feel your body becoming heavier and more relaxed as you envision the navigator at work, a position of great respect aboard any vessel. The basic tools of navigation included the compass, used to determine direction, the astrolabe or quadrant, used to measure the angle of celestial bodies above the horizon, the chip log, used to estimate speed, and hourglasses to measure the passage of time. With these simple instruments and considerable mathematical skill, navigators could approximate their position on the featureless ocean. Take another deep breath as you consider the process of finding one's latitude, the north-south position on the globe. By measuring the angle of the sun at noon or the North Star at night, a skilled navigator could determine how far north or south the vessel had traveled. This relatively straightforward calculation was reliable enough that sailors referred to traveling north or south as changing one's latitude. Longitude, the east-west position, presented a far greater challenge. Accurate determination of longitude required precise timekeeping, as the navigator needed to know the time at a reference point, like London or Paris, to compare with local time. The problem of creating a clock that could maintain accuracy despite the motion, temperature changes, and humidity of a sea voyage wouldn't be solved until John Harrison developed the marine chronometer in the mid-18th century, toward the end of the golden age of piracy. Feel yourself relaxing completely as you imagine how pirates and other sailors compensated for this limitation. Dead reckoning. The practice of estimating one's current position based on previously determined positions, heading, speed, and elapsed time was the primary method of navigation. This required meticulous record-keeping in the ship's log and an almost intuitive understanding of how winds, currents, and the vessel's characteristics affected its movement through water. The most experienced navigators developed what might seem like a sixth sense about their location, noting subtle changes in water color, the presence of certain birds or marine life, cloud formations over distant islands, or the smell of land carried on the breeze. This environmental awareness, combined with mathematical calculation and recorded knowledge, formed a holistic approach to navigation that was part science and part art. As your body remains deeply relaxed, consider how pirates use detailed knowledge of local waters to their advantage. Unlike naval captains who might be assigned to unfamiliar regions, successful pirates often operated in areas they knew intimately. Knowledge of hidden coves, shallow passages accessible only at certain tides, or reefs that could trap pursuing vessels provided significant tactical advantages. Charts were precious documents, often incomplete or deliberately vague about certain features to protect trade routes or military secrets. Pirates would seize navigational charts when capturing vessels and compile knowledge from various sources to create more complete understandings of their operational areas. Let the rhythm of your breathing remain slow and deep as you appreciate the remarkable skills that allowed these mariners to traverse the world's oceans with technology we would consider primitive. Their intimate connection with the natural world, their mathematical precision, and their ability to synthesize information from diverse sources represent an impressive intellectual tradition that made their maritime lives possible. As you continue to rest in this deeply relaxed state, let's turn our attention to the clothing and personal possessions of pirates during this fascinating period. Popular culture has created vivid attire, elaborate coats, flamboyant hats, striped shirts, and abundant jewelry. But the historical reality was both more practical and more diverse. Imagine a typical pirate standing watch on the quarterdeck. Rather than the theatrical costumes of films, you would likely see clothing that prioritized function over fashion, though not without personal touches that expressed individual identity. Feel your body becoming even more relaxed as you envision these practical mariners in their working clothes. The foundation of maritime attire was the simple linen or cotton shirt, loose fitting with wide sleeves that could be rolled up during work or allowed to billow in the breeze for comfort in hot weather. These might be white or unbleached when new, but would quickly take on the weathered appearance of all clothing at sea, stained by tar, sun-bleached, and patched as needed. Some sailors preferred checked or striped fabrics when they could get them, a tradition that eventually evolved into the classic sailor's striped shirt of later centuries. Take another deep, cleansing breath as you consider the practical trousers worn by most sailors. These were typically made of canvas, wool, or linen, depending on climate and availability. They often ended just below the knee. Full-length trousers could become dangerously waterlogged or caught in rigging. Longer canvas trousers called slops might be worn over these breeches in cold or wet weather for additional protection. Footwear was optional for many sailors who preferred bare feet for better grip on wet decks. When shoes were worn, they were simple leather shoes without heels that might catch on rigging or deck features. Boots were generally reserved for shore excursions or foul weather. Some pirates, particularly captains or those who had seized finer goods, might sport buckled shoes or boots as a status symbol. Feel yourself drifting peacefully as you imagine the practical accessories that completed the sailor's outfit. A sash or belt around the waist served to hold weapons and small personal items. Bandanas or cloth caps protected the head from sun and kept hair from becoming entangled in rigging. For cooler weather or watch duty at night, simple woolen jackets or coats provided warmth. The iconic pirate captain's elaborate coat with wide cuffs and brass buttons certainly existed, but was likely reserved for specific occasions rather than daily wear. These impressive garments were often taken from captured officers or purchased as demonstrations of success and status. Similarly, the wide-brimmed hat adorned with feathers, what we now call the tricorn, served practical purposes of sun and rain protection, but could also be decorated to express individual flair. As your body remains completely at ease, consider the personal possessions that a pirate might carry. A knife served as both tool and weapon, used for everything from cutting rope to eating meals. A small pouch might contain personal treasures, a lock of hair from a loved one, a rare coin kept as a lucky charm, or a piece of jewelry too valuable to wear during daily tasks. Jewelry itself served multiple purposes in pirate culture. Beyond decoration, gold earrings, rings, and necklaces represented portable wealth that stayed with the wearer at all times. Some sailors believed gold earrings improved eyesight, while others viewed them as payment to ensure a proper burial if their body washed ashore after death at sea. Let your mind drift peacefully as you appreciate how these practical garments and personal effects reflected both the demands of maritime life and the identity of those who wore them. Far from the uniform appearance of naval sailors, pirates expressed their rejection of conventional authority through personalized attire that combined practical necessity with individual expression. Allow yourself to relax even more deeply as we explore how pirates and sailors entertained themselves during the long hours between ports or battles. Life at sea involved periods of intense activity interspersed with considerable downtime, especially during favorable sailing conditions when minimal attention was needed to maintain course and speed. Imagine the main deck during an evening of fair weather. The day's work is complete, and those not on watch have gathered to enjoy a few hours of leisure before retiring to their hammocks below. The lanterns cast a warm glow as the sun sets, and the gentle motion of the ship creates a soothing backdrop to the scene. Feel your body becoming increasingly relaxed as you envision this moment of community and recreation. Music played a central role in maritime entertainment. Unlike the structured work songs or shanties used to coordinate labor during the day, evening music might include ballads, love songs, or narrative pieces that told stories of adventure, loss, or homecoming. Common instruments included the fiddle, being compact enough for shipboard storage, the tin whistle or penny whistle, affordable and easy to learn, and various small drums or percussion instruments that could be improvised from ship's materials if necessary. Take another deep breath as you consider the importance of storytelling in this predominantly oral culture. Many sailors were illiterate, but the tradition of memorizing and recounting tales was strong. These stories might include traditional folklore from various cultures, accounts of maritime adventures or supernatural occurrences at sea, or news and gossip from recent ports of call. A skilled storyteller was valued for their ability to transport listeners beyond the confined world of the ship through vivid descriptions and engaging narratives. Games of chance were enormously popular despite being forbidden by many ships' articles. Dice and card games offered excitement and the opportunity to win additional money or privileges, though they could also lead to dangerous disputes in the close confines of a vessel. Some captains allowed gambling with strict limitations to prevent serious conflicts, while others enforced absolute prohibitions. Feel yourself drifting deeper into relaxation as you imagine the more physical pastimes. Wrestling matches or contests of strength provided both entertainment and status-establishing opportunities among the crew. These might be friendly competitions or more serious tests of dominance, carefully monitored to prevent injury to participants who were all essential to the ship's operation. Craftsmanship offered both practical benefits and creative outlet. Sailors would carve scrimshaw designs on whalebones or teeth, create intricate knotwork from spare lengths of rope, or fashion small wooden models of ships. These items might serve as gifts, items for trade, or simply personal keepsakes. The development of these skills passed the time while also producing beautiful and functional objects from limited materials. As your body remains completely relaxed, consider how literacy, while not universal, was more common among pirates than is often assumed. Books were precious commodities, read aloud for group entertainment or privately by those with the ability. When ships took prizes, books might be claimed along with more obvious valuables, particularly navigational texts, maps, or stories that could transport the reader beyond the confines of their wooden world. Alcohol played a significant role in pirate recreation, consumed both as part of daily rations and in larger quantities during celebrations. The temporary escape from the hardships of maritime life that intoxication provided was valued, though excessive drunkenness was generally discouraged during active operations as it endangered the entire community. Let the rhythm of your breathing remain slow and deep as you appreciate how these diverse forms of entertainment created bonds among the crew preserved cultural traditions from their various backgrounds, and provided necessary psychological relief from the stresses and monotony that could characterize life at sea. Through music, stories, games, and crafts, these maritime communities maintained their humanity and creativity even in the challenging environment of a wooden vessel far from shore. As you continue to rest in this peaceful state, let's explore the rich world of superstitions and beliefs that shaped the spiritual lives of pirates and sailors during the golden age of piracy. The unpredictable and dangerous nature of life at sea fostered a complex tapestry of supernatural beliefs, rituals, and taboos that helped mariners make sense of their precarious existence. Imagine the crew gathering as the ship prepares to leave port. Before weighing anchor, certain rituals must be observed to ensure a fortunate voyage. Perhaps coins are nailed to the mast as offerings, or specific phrases are spoken as the sails are first raised. Feel your body becoming even more deeply relaxed as you envision these moments where the physical work of sailing intersected with spiritual practices meant to influence forces beyond human control. The sea itself was often personified as a powerful, temperamental entity that needed to be respected and sometimes appeased. Some sailors would throw the first portion of their rum ration into the water as an offering to Old Man Sea, or refer to the ocean as Mother Ocean, when speaking of its gentler aspects. These personifications reflected the intimate yet wary relationship mariners maintained with the element that both supported and threatened their existence. Take another deep breath as you consider how diverse beliefs coexisted aboard pirate vessels. Christianity remained the dominant religion among European pirates, though often practiced in unorthodox ways far from church authority. African spiritual traditions brought by formerly enslaved crew members introduced concepts like protective amulets and respect for ancestral spirits. Indigenous Caribbean beliefs might influence understanding of local weather patterns or coastal features. This syncretic spiritual environment created space for numerous superstitions specific to maritime life. Birds held special significance. Albatrosses were considered harbingers of good luck, and harming one would bring misfortune, a belief later immortalized in Coleridge's Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Conversely, killing a seagull might invite storms, as these birds were sometimes believed to carry the souls of drowned sailors. Feel yourself relaxing completely as you imagine other common maritime superstitions. Whistling aboard ship was often forbidden except during specific circumstances, as it might whistle up a wind, beneficial during calm but potentially disastrous during storms. Beginning a voyage on Fridays was considered unlucky, as was carrying specific objects thought to bring misfortune, such as umbrellas or items with the color blue, associated with drowning. Women aboard ship were generally considered bad luck by European sailors, though this belief varied across cultures and was occasionally disregarded, as evidenced by the presence of notable female pirates like Anne Bonny and Mary Read. These two women disguised themselves as men initially, but eventually revealed their identities while serving aboard Calico Jack Rackham's vessel. Their presence challenges the narrative of universal adherence to all maritime superstitions. As your body remains deeply relaxed, consider the rituals surrounding death at sea. The proper burial of a sailor, sewn into a shroud made from canvas, with the last stitch traditionally passing through the nose to confirm death was not merely apparent, then committed to the deep with appropriate words, was considered essential for the deceased spirit to rest peacefully. Improper handling of the dead was thought to invite haunting or misfortune upon the vessel. Tattoos served both decorative and spiritual purposes in maritime culture. Beyond their aesthetic appeal, certain designs were believed to offer protection. Crosses or religious symbols to ward off evil, pigs and roosters tattooed on the feet to prevent drowning, as these animals were kept in wooden crates that would float if washed overboard, or specific knots and patterns thought to bring good fortune or safe return to port. Let the gentle rhythm of your breathing guide you deeper into relaxation as you appreciate how these supernatural beliefs created a framework for understanding the unpredictable world of maritime life. Rather than mere superstition, these practices represented sophisticated psychological adaptations to an environment where danger could arise suddenly, and many factors remained beyond human control. As you continue to rest in this deeply relaxed state, let's explore a lesser-known aspect of the golden age of piracy: the presence and contributions of women who defied conventional gender roles to join these maritime communities. While significantly outnumbered by men, several women earned their place in pirate history through their courage, leadership, and refusal to be confined by the social limitations of their time. Imagine a bustling Caribbean port in the early 18th century. Among the sailors moving cargo, negotiating deals, and enjoying shore leave, you might spot individuals dressed in men's clothing who move with the confidence and weathered appearance of experienced mariners. Some of these figures might be women in disguise, choosing the freedom of masculine presentation over the restricted options available to women of the period. Feel your body becoming even more relaxed as you envision these remarkable individuals navigating both the physical seas and the complex social waters of their time. The most famous female pirates of the era were Anne Bonny and Mary Read, whose lives intersected aboard the ship of Captain Calico Jack Rackham in the Caribbean. Both initially disguised themselves as men, though they eventually revealed their true identities to the crew. Historical accounts suggest they were respected for their fighting abilities and participated fully in the ship's operations and battles. Take another deep breath as you consider Mary Read's extraordinary life journey. Born in England, she first dressed as a boy after her brother's death, when her mother disguised her to continue receiving financial support from a relative who would only assist a male child. This early experience with gender disguise served her well when she later joined the military, married, and eventually found her way to the Caribbean and pirate life after her husband's death. Anne Bonny's path to piracy was different, but equally remarkable. Born to a lawyer and his maid in Ireland, she eventually moved to the Carolinas and then to Nassau in the Bahamas. There she met and began an affair with Calico Jack Rackham, leaving her husband to join Rackham's crew. Historical accounts describe her as fierce and capable, participating fully in boarding actions and the operation of the vessel. Feel yourself drifting peacefully as you imagine the moment when Rackham's ship was captured by a British sloop in 1720. According to witness testimony, Anne Bonny and Mary Read were among the few crew members who actively resisted, fighting fiercely, while many of their male companions, including Rackham himself, hid below decks. This account suggests not only their acceptance aboard ship, but their exceptional courage even by pirate standards. While Bonny and Read are the most well-documented female pirates of the Golden Age, they were likely not alone. The nature of pirate record-keeping and the incentive for women to maintain their disguises means others almost certainly existed whose stories have been lost to history. Some women may have maintained male identities throughout their pirate careers, their true gender known only to close confidants or discovered only after death. As your body remains completely relaxed, consider how pirate society, with its rejection of conventional authority and creation of alternative social structures, might have provided unique opportunities for women seeking escape from the severe limitations placed on their gender during this period. While we should not romanticize pirate communities as fully egalitarian, they remained predominantly male spaces shaped by the attitudes of their time. They did represent spaces where exceptional individuals could sometimes transcend social boundaries through competence and courage. The historical record also includes accounts of powerful women who controlled pirate operations from shore positions. Cheng Yi-sao, also known as Qing Shi, though active in the South China Sea slightly after the traditional Golden Age, commanded what may have been the largest pirate fleet in history after taking over her husband's operation following his death. At her height, she controlled over 300 junks and commanded 20,000 to 40,000 pirates through a rigidly enforced code of conduct. Let your mind drift peacefully as you appreciate these remarkable historical figures who challenge our assumptions about gender roles in maritime history. Their stories remind us that throughout history, individuals have found ways to pursue freedom and self-determination even against formidable social barriers. As you continue to relax deeply, let's explore the vital shore-based aspects of pirate life. The ports, havens, and communities that supported maritime outlaws during the Golden Age of piracy. These locations provided essential services, markets for stolen goods, recruitment opportunities, and rare moments of respite from the hardships of life at sea. Imagine approaching a pirate haven like Port Royal, Jamaica, in the late 17th century. Once described as the wickedest city on earth, this bustling port before its destruction by earthquake in 1692 represented the height of pirate society on land. The harbor would be filled with vessels of various types, legitimate merchant ships alongside those flying less reputable flags. Feel your body becoming even more relaxed as you envision this vibrant maritime community where the boundaries between legal and illegal activities often blurred. Successful pirate havens shared several key characteristics. They typically offered excellent natural harbors with defensible approaches that allowed for quick escape if authorities arrived. They existed in areas with limited or corrupt governance, where officials might be bribed to ignore illegal activities. And they provided access to trade routes where merchant vessels could be targeted and markets where stolen goods could be sold. Take another deep breath as you consider Nassau in the Bahamas, perhaps the most famous pirate haven of all. During the early 18th century, particularly from 1706 to 1718, Nassau became the center of a remarkable experiment in pirate self-governance. After years of war between European powers had left the Bahamas with minimal official presence, pirates established what some historians have called a pirate republic in Nassau, a community governed largely by their own codes rather than by distant monarchs or colonial governors. At its height, Nassau hosted hundreds of pirates, including notorious captains like Blackbeard, Edward Teach, Charles Vane, Jack Rackham, and Benjamin Hornigold. The community operated with a surprising degree of organization, with former privateers applying their maritime skills to create a functioning society outside conventional authority. This experiment in alternative governance ended when Wooders Rogers arrived as the new British governor in 1718, offering pardons to those who renounced piracy and hunting down those who refused. Feel yourself drifting peacefully as you imagine the practical services available in these pirate ports. Shipwrights would repair vessels damaged by weather or combat. Merchants, often operating with few questions about the origin of goods, provided opportunities to convert stolen cargo into currency. Taverns and boarding houses offered food, drink, entertainment, and temporary lodging between voyages. Information about potential targets, naval patrols, or political developments circulated freely, creating an early intelligence network for those operating outside the law. The social world of pirate ports was as diverse as the crews themselves. European settlers mixed with indigenous peoples and formerly enslaved Africans who had found freedom through various means. Languages, cuisines, and cultural practices combined to create distinctive local cultures. Women played important roles in these communities as tavern keepers, merchants, information brokers, and sometimes partners in piratical enterprises, enjoying greater independence than in more conventional colonial settlements. As your body remains completely relaxed, consider how these pirate havens existed in the margins and gaps of imperial control. The 17th and early 18th centuries saw European powers struggling to establish and maintain authority over vast oceanic empires. The distances involved, limited communication technology, and constant conflicts between imperial powers created spaces where alternative communities could emerge, however, temporarily. Other significant pirate havens included Tortuga off the northwest coast of Hispaniola, which served as a base for the buccaneers who preceded Golden Age pirates. Various hidden coves and inlets along Madagascar's coast that supported pirates operating in the Indian Ocean, and Libertalia, a possibly legendary pirate settlement on Madagascar founded on principles of equality and democracy. Let the rhythm of your breathing remain slow and deep as you appreciate how these shore communities complemented and sustained pirate operations at sea. Together, ships and ports created an interconnected world that challenged conventional authority and offered alternative possibilities to those seeking escape from the hierarchical societies of early modern Europe and its colonies. As you rest in this deeply relaxed state, let's explore the factors that brought the golden age of piracy to its conclusion in the 1730s, transforming these maritime outlaws from a significant threat to imperial commerce into figures of legend and eventually romantic fiction. Imagine yourself aboard one of the last successful pirate vessels of the era. Perhaps the ship of Bartholomew Roberts, one of the most accomplished pirates of the Golden Age. Unlike earlier decades when pirate captains could operate with relative impunity, by the 1720s the hunting had become more dangerous, the safe harbors fewer, and the likelihood of ending at the gallows significantly higher. Feel your body becoming even more deeply relaxed as you consider this turning point in maritime history. The decline of piracy resulted from several converging factors, beginning with the end of the War of the Spanish Succession in 1714. During the war, many sailors had found legitimate employment as privateers, privately owned vessels commissioned by governments to attack enemy shipping. When peace arrived, thousands of experienced mariners with specialized combat skills found themselves unemployed, with piracy offering a tempting alternative. However, this same peace allowed European navies to redirect their resources from fighting each other to suppressing piracy. Take another deep breath as you consider how colonial governments, initially ambivalent about piracy that primarily harmed their European rivals, gradually recognized that stable commerce benefited their developing economies. Colonial administrators who had once turned a blind eye to pirate activities became increasingly committed to eradicating this threat to legitimate trade. Former pirate havens like Port Royal, Nassau, and New Providence came under effective government control, eliminating crucial safe harbors. The legal framework for addressing piracy also evolved. The 1700 Act for the More Effectual Suppression of Piracy established special admiralty courts in colonial territories, allowing for faster prosecution without the need to transport accused pirates back to Europe. This legislation, along with subsequent laws, streamlined the process of trying and executing pirates, creating a more effective deterrent. Feel yourself drifting peacefully as you consider the technological and tactical developments that made pirates more vulnerable. Naval vessels designed specifically for anti-piracy operations, faster with shallow drafts for coastal pursuit, and well-armed, began to patrol known pirate hunting grounds. Naval commanders developed more effective strategies for intercepting pirate ships, and improved coordination between colonial powers created a more unified response to the pirate threat. Perhaps most significantly, merchant shipping adapted to the pirate challenge. Vessels began sailing in convoys protected by naval escorts rather than traveling individually. Ship designs evolved to incorporate better defensive features, and crews became better armed and trained to resist attack. These changes significantly reduced pirates' ability to take prizes easily, making their profession both more dangerous and less profitable. As your body remains completely relaxed, consider the symbolic end of the Golden Age, the death of Bartholomew Roberts in 1722. Roberts, known as Black Bart, was one of the most successful pirates of the era, capturing over 400 vessels during his relatively brief 3-year career. His death in battle against HMS Swallow off the coast of Africa, and the subsequent capture and execution of his crew, represented a turning point. Within a few years of Roberts' death, most major pirate captains had been captured and executed, or had accepted pardons and retired from their criminal activities. By the 1730s, large-scale piracy in the Caribbean and Atlantic had declined significantly, though it never disappeared entirely from the world's oceans. Instead, the phenomenon transformed, with new pirate communities emerging in different regions and with different characteristics. The Barbary corsairs continued their operations in the Mediterranean until the early 19th century. Maritime raiding persisted in Southeast Asian waters with distinctive local practices. Piracy continues even in the modern era, though with very different methods and technology than those of the Golden Age. Let your mind drift peacefully as you consider how these historical pirates, though their era lasted only a few decades, left an outsized legacy on our cultural imagination. Even as their actual operations were suppressed, pirates entered literature, art, and folklore as complex symbols of freedom, rebellion, and adventure. From early accounts like A General History of the Pirates, published in 1724, to modern films and novels, these maritime outlaws have maintained their hold on our collective fascination. As we near the conclusion of our historical journey, allow yourself to relax even more deeply, as we explore how the Golden Age pirates, despite their relatively brief historical moment, have achieved an extraordinary afterlife in cultural memory and artistic representation that continues to evolve even today. Imagine a timeline stretching from the 1730s, when the last significant pirate captains of the Golden Age were captured or killed, through the centuries to our present moment. Along this timeline appear books, plays, artworks, films, and other creative works that have interpreted and reinterpreted the pirate phenomenon for new generations. Feel your body becoming completely relaxed as you consider this remarkable cultural persistence. The transformation of pirates from feared criminals to romantic adventurers began surprisingly quickly after their suppression. A General History of the Pirates, published in 1724 by Captain Charles Johnson, possibly a pseudonym for Daniel Defoe, provided sensationalized accounts of major pirate figures while they were still active or only recently defeated. This influential work, while containing useful historical information, also established many of the narrative tropes that would shape pirate fiction for centuries to come. Take another deep breath as you consider how the 19th century witnessed a significant romanticization of piracy in literature. Lord Byron's poem The Corsair, 1814, presented the pirate as a brooding, complex anti-hero rather than a simple criminal. James Fenimore Cooper's The Red Rover, 1827, and Sir Walter Scott's The Pirate, 1822, further developed the image of the pirate as a figure challenging corrupt social orders rather than merely seeking personal gain. This literary transformation reached its apotheosis with Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island, 1883, which introduced many elements now considered essential to pirate fiction, including buried treasure, the treasure map, the one-legged pirate, and the parrot companion. Stevenson's complex character Long John Silver, neither wholly villain nor hero, established the template for the charming, morally ambiguous pirate that remains popular in contemporary fiction. Feel yourself drifting peacefully as you imagine how the early 20th century brought pirates to visual media. The silent film era saw numerous pirate adventures, followed by the swashbuckling era of sound films with stars like Errol Flynn and Tyrone Power portraying dashing pirate heroes. These films established the visual vocabulary we now associate with pirates: elaborate costumes, swordplay on deck, and dramatic ship battles, often with only tenuous connections to historical reality. The latter half of the 20th century saw continued evolution of the pirate image. Films like The Crimson Pirate, 1952, played the concept for comedy, while Pirates of the Caribbean, 2003, and its sequels blended historical elements with supernatural fantasy. Television series, animated films, and countless children's stories further cemented pirates in popular imagination, often softening their more violent aspects for younger audiences. As your body remains deeply relaxed, consider how historical research has simultaneously worked to recover the more complex reality behind these romantic images. Scholars have examined the economic conditions that fostered piracy, the political contexts that alternately encouraged and suppressed maritime outlaws, and the diverse backgrounds of those who joined pirate crews. This research has revealed fascinating aspects of pirate social organization, including their relatively democratic governance and their creation of alternative communities outside conventional authority. Particularly significant has been the recovery of previously marginalized figures in pirate history: the women who defied gender conventions to join pirate crews, the formerly enslaved individuals who found freedom in these maritime communities, and the indigenous sailors who brought their knowledge and traditions to these floating societies. This more inclusive understanding of pirate history has influenced contemporary representations, gradually creating more diverse pirate narratives. Let the rhythm of your breathing remain slow and deep as you appreciate how pirates have become remarkably versatile cultural symbols. They can represent rebellion against unjust authority, the freedom of life outside conventional society, the allure of adventure, or the possibility of reinventing oneself beyond social constraints. Perhaps this symbolic flexibility explains their enduring appeal across centuries and cultures. Today, the Golden Age pirate exists simultaneously as historical reality and cultural myth, with the two versions informing and transforming each other in an ongoing dialogue between past and present. From historical reenactments aiming for accuracy to playful talk like a pirate day celebrations, we continue to engage with these maritime figures who, in their brief historical moment, created communities and practices fascinating enough to capture imagination for centuries. As our historical journey draws to a close, allow yourself to relax completely, drifting gently like a ship at anchor in a peaceful harbor. We've explored many aspects of life aboard pirate vessels during the golden age of piracy, from the practical details of daily existence to the complex social structures that governed these floating communities. The wooden ships that carried these maritime outlaws across the Atlantic and Caribbean were more than mere vessels. They were self-contained societies operating beyond the reach of conventional authority. Within these floating worlds, pirates created alternative governance systems centuries before democratic principles became widespread on land. Their articles of agreement, processes for electing and deposing leaders, and systems for distributing resources reflected both practical adaptations to maritime conditions and radical reimaginings of social organization. Take a final deep breath as you consider how these historical mariners navigated not just physical seas but the complex circumstances of their time. Many were forced into piracy by economic necessity or press ganging, while others chose this life for the freedom and opportunity it represented, despite its dangers. Their communities included individuals from diverse backgrounds: former naval sailors and merchant mariners, escaped slaves seeking liberty, indigenous peoples with valuable local knowledge, and occasional women who defied gender restrictions of their era. The physical realities of their existence, from the challenges of preserving food at sea to the medical limitations of pre-modern healthcare, required ingenuity and resilience. Their navigational achievements with rudimentary instruments demonstrate remarkable mathematical and observational skills. Their combat tactics reflected strategic thinking rather than the chaotic violence often portrayed in fiction. Feel yourself drifting ever deeper toward peaceful sleep as you appreciate how these historical figures, despite their brief moment on the world stage, left an enduring legacy that continues to evolve in our cultural imagination. From feared criminals to romantic adventurers to complex symbols of freedom and rebellion, pirates have maintained their hold on our collective fascination across centuries. As your consciousness begins to fade gently towards sleep, imagine once more the sounds that surrounded those who lived this maritime life. The creaking of wooden timbers, the snap of canvas as wind fills the sails, the rhythmic wash of waves against the hull. These sensory experiences, so foreign to our modern existence, were the constant companions of those who made their lives at sea during this remarkable period. Let these imagined sounds carry you toward deep, restful sleep, having journeyed through time to understand the complex reality behind the romantic myths of the golden age of piracy. May your dreams be filled with open horizons, distant shores, and the freedom of the endless sea.